Cinema. I love cinema. New cinema, old cinema, bold cinema, cold cinema. I love masterpiece films, tour de force performances, inspired visuals, dazzling special effects. I love to be made to feel deeply, to be brought to tears by incredible musical score, to have my mind open to new perspectives, to ponder fascinating, enlightening, and terrifying questions about the human condition, to endlessly examine art that gets better and better the closer you look, which of course brings us to today's topic, the Resident Evil movies. I freaking love trash. Trashy, junk, stupid video games, shallow party music, shirts that look like this. As the world crumbles around us and life gets harder and harder, I might be starting to like bad movies more than good movies. What I'm talking about here is the bell curve. One end is good, the other end is bad, and in the middle is okay. Everything above this line is mostly going to be enjoyable. Everything above this line is where you start to have a real good time. Although there are also just terrible, unwatchable movies that I hate, so I guess a bell curve isn't the perfect way to illustrate the spectrum of movie quality. More and more frequently, at the end of a day, I just want to sit back, turn my brain off, brew up a quick bottle, and settle in for some low-nutrition, high-fructose fun. Over the last couple years, I've been growing into quite the Resident Evil fan. I'm certainly no expert, but I know a Sherry Birkin from a Barry Burton. What you're gonna have to understand, however, is that these movies are some of the least faithful adaptations of anything I've ever seen in my life. If what you're looking for is just a live-action recreation of any particular game, you're not gonna get that. But if you want something that takes the characters and the general storyline of those games and applies them in a new way that fits the medium of film better, you're not gonna get that either. But if you can look past those superficial elements and try to appreciate these movies for being a less literal adaptation of the events of the games, and instead try to look at them as an adaptation of the creeping dread, the feeling of desperate survival, and the slow burn tension of those games, you're also not going to get that. These have almost nothing to do with the games. So if you want to enjoy these movies, you have to completely abandon the idea that you're going to get any of what you loved about the games from them. But if you ever thought, I wish Aliens was the Fast and the Furious, then these are the movies for you. And after having watched them all, I'd put them pretty high up on that bell curve. There's a ton of passion from everyone behind the scenes and a lot of old school filmmaking techniques that are all but disappeared from modern movies. I don't mind when a movie is cheesy and stupid and makes no sense. I just want interesting choices to be made and for action scenes to be planned by the actual filmmakers, and for visual effects to be intentional, even if they've aged terribly. If I was watching these movies back when they were coming out, I probably would have thought they sucked too. Why would I watch this junk when I have so many amazing options to choose from? It's 2016, action blockbusters are so good, movies are thriving, I'm gonna live forever. Now it's all like, wah. All this crap is so dull and lifeless and sterile, and they're only heading further in that direction. So I just crave movies that are a little rougher around the edges, that have an often flawed human touch, and are dumb in a way that they're made for dumb people to sit in a movie theater and be entertained by, rather than for dumb people to put on the background while they scroll. Well, enough of this drivel, let's talk about the Resident Evil movies. The film rights to Resident Evil were bought by the German production company Constantin Films in 1997. For a couple years, different filmmakers came on board and left the project before it could get off the ground, including George Romero, why not? Eventually, the studio settled on the director of the financially very successful Mortal Kombat adaptation, Paul W.S. Anderson, who was a huge fan of the original Resident Evil game and had been working on a script for a while. Now, Paul W.S. Anderson is a very controversial director, not because of any scandals or anything. Well, there is one we're gonna get into later, but it's not the kind of thing directors usually get in trouble for. More so just because people think his movies suck. And look, it's fair to have that opinion, but I just saw one battle after another, and I gotta say, the dude has come a long way. Let's get into things. The movie opens on some kind of guy in some kind of lab. He has a tube of something that he throws and it breaks. The security camera who's watching his every move sees this and scans the broken vial and does not like what she finds at all. This is bad news for the group of people in this office that we'll soon find out is a secret Umbrella Corporation underground facility. Alarms start going off and the camera just sits by and watches as all these people are killed by gas and elevator crushing and drowning. I'll say that I think this opening scene is the scariest moment in the entire franchise. The idea of being trapped underground while this unfeeling security system that's designed to keep you safe is just swiftly, systematically killing off you and your coworkers is deeply unsettling to me. And showing us so much of this through the camera's POV emphasizes how unfeeling this mysterious entity is. Being trapped in somewhere would have to be one of the worst ways to go. The shot from Titanic where the door closes before the guy can get out really traumatized me as a child. I don't like being underground. I'd much rather go out being tossed from a helicopter. So with all the workers presumed dead, we cut to a woman lying on the floor of a shower. It's immediately clear that she's confused and disoriented and doesn't seem to remember anything. But we're also soon shown that she's already starting to get flashes of memories. This scene's actually a classic example of showing rather than telling. The first thing I was shown was that she's somehow the only thing not in focus in this shot. But if we can get serious for a moment, as she tries to piece things together, she sees a note on the table and her first move is to copy the note to see if the handwriting matches, which is shown and understood without a single line of dialogue. She briefly steps outside and all of a sudden things start getting crazy. Crows start going wild, the wind kicks up, some guy grabs her and pulls her inside 1 second before some kind of armed squad busts in. They're about to straight execute this guy, but they find a Raccoon City police badge in his wallet, and even though they aren't able to verify it, they decide to take him into custody and bring him along on their adventure, which is yet to be revealed. But they do take off their masks, which makes them a lot less scary, and we see that we have the leader, we have Michelle Rodriguez, and the rest. They take the main girl and the handcuffed cop guy down into this secret tunnel, which leads to a train to a super secret bunker, which is where all the people died in the beginning. And also on the tram, they find the husband from this picture we saw earlier, who's also disoriented and has no memory. This place is called The Hive. It's an underground lab slash office slash living quarters owned by the Umbrella Corporation, a big pharmaceutical company who may possibly be up to something shady in this secret underground fortress. They point out that the view of the city we saw in the window earlier was just a translite to make people feel less claustrophobic working underground.
Makes it easier to work underground, thinking there's a view.
Yeah, I know, I just said all that. I was able to deduce it myself. Why you gotta over-explain this stuff? This is the exact thing I praised the movie for not doing earlier. It is pretty interesting to see the quality of this movie actually decrease steadily in real time. In the first 10 or 15 minutes, you might think you're in for a genuinely great horror movie. Then by the end, the cartoon monster that's being dragged along the train tracks by its tongue catches fire for no reason and explodes. But let me not get ahead of myself. The special ops team is here on a mission to shut down the Hive's AI overlord known as the Red Queen after she supposedly went haywire and killed everyone for seemingly no reason. There's also a half-baked Alice in Wonderland motif going on for some reason. The main character, even though I think it's never actually said at any point in this movie, is named Alice. We have the Red Queen, which is a reference to the Red Queen. Alice walks through a mirror from a seemingly normal world into a bunch of craziness, you know, like through the looking glass, you know what I'm talking about, but also very Resident Evil to have a secret passage open up behind a mirror. We got the White Rabbit imagery. There's no consistency or reason behind it, and it never pays off, and it doesn't mean anything, but like I said, my standards are very low these days, so some guy trying some stupid thing that didn't work out is very endearing to me. And don't worry, all the other movies will more than make up for her not having said her name was Alice in this movie.
My name is Alice. My name is Alice. My name is Alice. My name is Alice. My name is Alice.
As the squad makes their way to the inner sanctum to kill the Red Queen, they stumble upon a couple creepy little things, but they're all about the mission. So much so that they just walk straight through this unknown liquid that's shooting out of this tank. You don't know what's in there. This is a secret lab. It could give you an incurable bacterial infection, or a severe chemical burn, cancer. There was enough room to walk around it and avoid getting at least most of it on you. Well, a couple of these guys stay upstairs while most of the team goes down to the Red Queen's lair. Once they get to the hallway outside the lair, they have the one guy do some hacking while most of the rest of the team moves through the corridor to shut her down. What follows is undoubtedly the most well-remembered scene in this movie. The most iconic scene in the whole franchise, if if I'm being real with you. I mean, the later movies love to reference it. We'll get to all that eventually. What happens here is that the hallway starts having lasers while the guys in there are trapped. It's a genuinely very well-crafted, tense, scary scene of people dying as we continue to cut back to the people on the outside trying in vain to save their compatriots. The guys on the inside do their best to dodge the lasers, and they're pretty skilled, but the Red Queen is skilleder, and she's one step ahead of them. When the only guy left is the leader, and they're super close to shutting the lasers down, he's just about to dodge the last one, but instead the Red Queen goes, "Nope, fuck you," and multiplies the laser into an impossible-to-dodge grid that turns the squad leader into cubes. It's a great subversion. This guy seems like someone who would make it into the third act at least, but instead he's killed before any zombies even show up. And I love that we see his eye start to melt a little bit before they rack focus away and he crumbles apart. Alice is like, "Damn, I'll look away for a second, but when am I gonna get another chance to see a man cubed up like this?" Turns out a lot. We'll get to it. So why didn't the Red Queen just start with the grid and kill them all in one foul swoop instead of giving them a chance to dodge? I mean, that's like mowing the lawn with a pair of scissors even though you have a lawnmower right there. Well, I can think of two reasons. One, they wanted to have a cool action scene of people dodging lasers and getting killed by them in different ways. And two, the only in-universe explanation I can think of is that the Red Queen was just enjoying fucking with them. She wanted to torture them a bit and give them some false hope to really twist the knife. This doesn't gel at all with what we learn about the Red Queen in later movies, but that really seems like what's happening here. It is a great scene whether it makes sense or not. I assumed it was a reference to that part in Resident Evil 4 with the laser hallway, but it turns out that game came out a few years later, and that part in that game is actually a reference to this movie, because this scene is so cool. The remake of that game makes it look even more like the movie version. A monster even gets cubed up in that one. Whenever I'm standing there and there's a normal person around and I ask them if they've seen this movie and they go, I go, "Laser hallway," and they go, "Ah, yes." So they're finally able to shut down the laser less than a second after it cubes up our boy. That's half the cast killed off in one scene, and we haven't even gotten to the zombies. The remaining downstairs team are now able to get into the Red Queen chamber. She manifests as a hologram of a little British girl and tries telling them that if they shut her down, then the zombies are gonna get out and kill them all and get out and end the world and it'll be terrible, so they shouldn't shut her down. Except, in classic lazy screenwriting fashion, she leaves out the part where there are zombies down here and they'll get out and kill the whole team and end the world, and instead she just says,
"I wouldn't advise this. Disabling me will result in loss of primary power."
Come on, bro, don't shut down the power, come on. She really buries the lead. She doesn't mention at all why it would be bad for them if they shut down the power. Doesn't seem like something a super intelligence that was hell-bent on stopping a zombie outbreak at any cost would leave out of their main argument.
Please, I implore you, you have to get out.
But this vague, passive approach does lead to the most iconic line in the movie.
You're all going to die down here.
The uncanny head and face movement, combined with the girl's already creepy voice being run through a computery-sounding filter, is so memorable and genuinely chilling. The memorable moments in the later movies are mostly because of how stupid and bombastic they are, not because of their brilliant subtlety. But also everyone remembers the part in this movie where she kicks a dog, so the comically over-the-top action has always been a feature. Well, that's that, and with the Red Queen disabled, all the zombies are free to walk around and eat people. The zombie makeup is pretty decent in the dark lighting. The performances are all really good. The majority of the zombies were played by dancers who were able to naturally contort their bodies without any special effects and nail the nuances of certain movements. It's all very well done. The creatures, on the other hand, are less consistent. The dogs have basically three modes: real dog in silly makeup, CGI dog that Mila Jovovich is kicking, or just static, non-moving dog props. Presumably real taxidermied Dobermans. None of them look particularly good. The real dogs just kind of look like somebody spilled spaghetti on a dog. I mean, they were clearly very confused. Didn't know what kind of movie they were in at all. But there's one more creature that looks really unfortunate. You see, after they fight some zombies, Cop Guy uncuffs himself, some guy gets eaten, Letty gets bit, Cop Guy reveals to Alice that he's not actually a cop and he's actually part of an underground group trying to take down the Umbrella Corporation because they're way more evil and way more powerful than most people realize, and his sister was actually working undercover at Umbrella to try to sneak out evidence of their evil doing but was betrayed by her inside contact, and then Alice remembers that she was actually the inside contact he's talking about and starts to worry that she may have betrayed the sister, and then after she kicks a dog, husband guy gets all his memories back and remembers that he has to betray everyone because he's the one that actually betrayed the sister because he was spying on her talking to Alice, and then closes the lab door on everyone and leaves them all for dead. A creature that got free earlier ends up finding him right before he gets on the tram to escape, and it turns out to be a liquor. And it looks pretty bad. Apparently the liquor itself was a last-minute addition. After it eats this guy, it mutates into this giant dog monster, and it was originally only going to be that, but close to the end of production, Paul Sanderson changed his mind and decided that it should be a liquor first for a minute so we can have another thing from the games for a little bit. It's a shame, because earlier when Alice was looking at it in the tank and you couldn't really tell what it was, it seemed like they were teasing something really visceral and grotesque. But then it turns out to just be a cartoon. The big mutated version looks a lot better. They used an actual puppet in a lot of the shots. It's a little janky, but it gets the job done. The surviving characters, Alice, Letty, Cop Guy, and Other Guy, who he had a death fake out earlier, find Husband Guy's dead body by the tram, his plan to sell the virus to terrorism having failed. But he does still have the cure, which Alice is able to give to Letty right away.
I can kiss you, bitch.
This guy's like, hell yeah. But then the super dog licker busts in, scratches Cop Guy, kills Other Guy, and Letty's a zombie that they have to shoot before dumping the super licker out of the train. It all happens about as fast as I described it. Well, everything handled. As Alice and Cop Guy stumble out of the lab just in time, rather than salvation, they're met by a team of umbrella scientists who start holding them down. Cop Guy's wounds start looking crazy, so the scientist says this:
I want him in the Nemesis program.
They take the two away separately, and Alice wakes up. This is Jason Isaacs, by the way. Alice wakes up in an umbrella hospital room where they've probably been running tests on her. She uses her expert hacking skills to escape onto the streets, only to find the whole city in chaos and probably zombies everywhere. So Alice grabs herself a shotgun and says, "Hasta la vista, baby." Boom. Directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. Honestly, I think this movie still holds up today as a flawed but quite decent low-budget action horror. A subgenre that I'm generally not a fan of, but this movie's a bit of fun. I love the early 2000s sci-fi tech, I love the okay one-liners, I love the okay special effects, the cheesy slow-mo, the real sets, the makeup and puppetry. There are some really well-done, memorable moments. The score, oh boy, it was composed by Marco Beltrami and Marilyn Manson, and even if one of them might be a scumbag, that's a match made in heaven for a movie like this. The music really kicks ass. Of course, it's certainly not a one-for-one recreation of the first game, but I really like the direction they went in. It's a similar story about investigating a spooky mansion with an evil zombie lab underneath, even though the mansion part is far less significant in the movie. And they had characters that are reminiscent of the game characters while still having the freedom to give them their own personality or kill them off or have it be a surprise that they're the bad guy. Michelle Rodriguez does a great job playing Michelle Rodriguez in this movie. Looking cool while shooting a gun is an underrated acting skill. It's harder than you might think. Good work, Michelle. As an old man, my knees hurt just watching this part. They had the core cast go to boot camp and get military training to learn how to operate like a real squad. They learned a bunch of MMA. Milla Jovovich especially put in the work. She did as many of her own stunts as she could. Even if this movie isn't great, I just miss seeing this kind of passion put into these cheap IP-driven movies. The level of craft and artistry on display here makes this movie look like Blade Runner compared to contemporary blockbusters such as Stranger Things 5, Captain Marvel and the Big New Bird, and Jack Black movie. They really did a heck of a lot on a small budget. I also think it's worth noting that the zombie movie had kind of died off by the 90s. The only somewhat high-profile zombie movies from that decade are Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and Army of Darkness. The Resident Evil movie does deserve a lot of credit for helping revive the genre. I mean, 28 Days Later did come out the same year and probably deserves a lot more credit, but this movie was made at a time when zombies were pretty irrelevant, and it was still a hit. So just make sure you say thank you if you ever see this movie out in public.
You know, I'm all like buff and stuff, and I'm all like, yeah, like Linda Hamilton, and like, yeah, what's up?
It's insane to call your second movie Apocalypse. Even if you didn't know you were going to be making 5 more of these, it doesn't leave a lot of room to grow title-wise. Paul W.S. Anderson wrote the script for this movie, but he was already too deep into filming There Will Be Blood when production started, so directing duties went to the highly experienced DP and camera operator, Alexander Witt, which probably explains why this movie is the strongest on a cinematography level. This was his directorial debut, and he mostly went back to directing photography after this movie, but I think he did a good job. If you told me that the same guy directed both of these movies, I wouldn't even question it, and I question almost everything you tell me. The team behind the last movie looked at that one as more of a prequel to the games. Having no characters from the games in that movie left open the idea that the movie could exist in the world of the games. This movie completely abandons that. It's the most direct adaptation of one of the games in the entire series, that being Resident Evil 3. It's still not a one-for-one at all, but it follows the story of that game way more closely, and the protagonists from that game, Jill and Carlos, are main characters in this movie. And they do most of the same things. things. But at the end of the day, the true hero ends up still being Alice. Let's get into things. After the opening credits, recap, and title card, we open, ooh, the umbrella eye, I love this. We open in a major contrast to the first movie. We open on the idyllic Raccoon City suburbs as a weather reporter reports the weather. 85% chance of zombies. But underneath the city, a bunch of science guys are opening the hive again. I think they're using that door from the last movie that was impossible to open ever under any circumstances, no matter what. The scientists put the tricorder up to the door and they hear a bunch of monster noise and they go, whoa, that's a lot of T-virus in there. Then of course they get eaten by zombies. Hey, so editing now, I actually realized that this is a liquor that eats this guy, and you can see it in the reflection of his visor. That's pretty cool. Boom! Roll out the convoy of black SUVs that movie bad guys use so we can warn all the important people that they need to evacuate Raccoon City. One of those important guys is Dr. Charles Ashford. He's an umbrella scientist who's probably supposed to be a reference to like the Ashford twins or the you know, that family, or the dad from the games. Well, in this, he has a daughter named Angie, and she's also getting evacuated from her classroom. All the other kids here are going to be left to die. But her SUV gets T-boned in a complete coincidence, and she doesn't make it out of the city in time. 13 hours later, great depiction of Raccoon City, by the way. 13 hours later, we're looking at newspaper clippings in a dingy apartment. They're all about Jill Valentine and other unnamed STARS officers being let go because of their crazy stories about a mansion full of zombies. I was pretty shocked watching this when Jill showed up, because my understanding before seeing these movies was that nothing from the games, aside from Umbrella and zombies, is ever referenced. So this was really cool and surprising. Also, no one else is specifically mentioned in these headlines, by the way, just others. She leaves her apartment and runs to the police station where all the cops are trying to arrest these zombies, but Jill has experience, so she knows just to shoot them all, and she's got aimbot on, so she makes short work of the place. This is when these movies started really putting their back into making you think these characters are badass. Just an absurd level of skill from a character we've known for 1 second. I love it. She also frees this guy who's been cuffed to a bench by shooting the cuffs, of course. She tells everyone they should leave town, and they kinda listen to her. Meanwhile, a bad umbrella guy uses a computer to wake up Alice, which is what she woke up from at the end of the last movie, and they pretty much play that whole epilogue again. As night falls on Raccoon City, these umbrella operatives in a chopper, who are Carlos and Nikolai from the game. In this version, though, Nikolai is not a betrayer. He's just the guy from A Christmas Story who dies heroically later on. They land on this roof to try to help a lady. She got bit by a zombie, so she's like, no, I have to jump off this roof so I don't become a zombie. And they're like, no, don't worry, we can actually help you. And she's like, no, and jumps off the roof. Top-notch stuff. It's stupid, but it does establish that Carlos and Nikolai are good guys who will land in this chaos to help one person. Carlos is played by someone from Star Trek Discovery. I still haven't been able to force myself to watch the final season of that show, but I do remember liking Admiral Vance. Maybe that's why Anna Faris jumped off the roof here, because she saw his face and she was reminded of Star Trek Discovery. At the edge of the city, Jill's trying to make her way out, but Umbrella erected a massive wall and aren't letting anyone leave the city. Then the bad guy tells his men to just open fire. Why? I don't know. They're gonna nuke the city anyway, so why bother shooting anyone? And I love that these Umbrella soldiers are so evil that without hesitation they open fire on police, civilians, and their fellow Umbrella soldiers. So Jill and her stars bro here need to find another way out of the city. Alice is mostly walking around by herself. Wherever she's at, there don't seem to be a lot of zombies. She's been doing her thing this whole time, but when Jill and Stars guy and this reporter who are hiding in this church together begin to get overwhelmed by liquors, which still haven't aged great but look significantly better than before, Alice busts in to save them all. And she can't just kick down the door and headshot everyone like Jill in the beginning. That would be too boring. Instead, she flies through this giant stained glass window on a motorcycle, then hops off, throws the motorcycle at the liquor, which makes it kinda go up in the air, then she shoots the gas tank, thus exploding the liquor in the middle of the church. And everyone's like, oh my god, an explosion! Except Alice, who just confidently stands there and watches. This church is a full set, by the way. They built this whole thing so they could do a bunch of explosions in it. Once they leave the church, it's a whole lot of cutting between characters all trying to get out of the city. Carlos and Nikolai are realizing that Umbrella has abandoned them and they're on their own. The main group ends up in a cemetery where zombies start coming out of the ground, and I'm a little confused. Like, the T-virus doesn't work like that. It can't reanimate people months or years after they died. This is more like how space asteroid madness zombies work, not virus zombies. And for some reason, we're also still following that guy Jill freed from the police station earlier. He ends up getting distracted by some undead breasts and crashing his car, so he has to flee on foot. What sucks about this guy is that he has these two golden desert eagles that he shows off and teases the audience with and then never uses them, and you know you're not allowed to do that. Like, you're allowed to have nonsense characters and terrible effects and scenes that serve no purpose, but you're not not allowed to tease Golden Desert Eagles and never use them. He's showing the guns off because he ran into this big group of STARS members where he thought he'd be safe. But little did he know, something else arrived right after he did. It's our old friend Nemesis, and he looks okay. I mean, I'm glad they didn't try to do a CGI cartoon version, but this doesn't quite hit either. The costume looks pretty good in a still image, but the face has very little dexterity, and he's a bit smaller than he should be, and unfortunately I just don't think the stunt performer did an amazing job. Yeah, it must have been really hard to walk around all day in that getup, but he always looks so awkward. He's got a lot of the Michael Keaton Batman thing going on. Look at him crawling away from this pipe. So goofy. They did try to make him look taller in some shots by squeezing the footage a bit, like, you see the car here, see how the wheel isn't perfectly round? Doesn't really work. I'm sorry about that. I do like it a lot that they added a minigun. However, a question I have with this minigun, I mean, there's no way something like that is accurate enough for him to be able to mow down all these cops without hitting this guy even once, right? Our main group ends up getting a phone call from Dr. Ashford, who says he can get them out of there if they rescue his daughter Angie from the school. That ends up being where all the groups converge and get to Angie. It seems pretty obvious that this girl was the in-universe inspiration for the Red Queen. That doesn't turn out to be true, though. They were gonna do that, but they couldn't find a way to explain it that wasn't boring, so they just cut it at some point. In the school, Jill has this whole scene where she wants to escape from some more dogs with Angie. She lets out the gas, runs away all cool, but when she tosses the matchbook, it goes out before anything can explode, thus failing. But something you're gonna start noticing in these movies is that if Alice is around at all, no other protagonist is allowed to win the fight. They could do pretty good, but Alice is usually the one to strike the killing blow. So thankfully she happened to be standing there smoking a cigarette, which she flicks into the gas. She decided to do it in slow motion for maximum badass. Then, when Jill dives out of the way like a coward, Alice is there to wrap Angie in an explosion-proof blanket and save her life. So everyone's kind of together at this point. They're running to the helicopter that's gonna get them out of there before the Umbrella Corporation nukes the entire city in a minute. It's surrounded by guards though, so Alice goes in first, running directly down the side of a building and kicks everyone's ass by herself. I like this shot where the camera follows her jumping off the side of the building right here. The rest of the squad makes their way over, and then even more Umbrella guys start to pour in, with small Nemesis, and main Umbrella guy tells Alice she's been turned into an Umbrella weapon just like Cop Guy, but she doesn't have to look all gross and forget how to talk and stuff. And she hasn't even begun to realize the breadth of her power, he says. So because of science and field study of his experiments, they force Alice to fight Nemesis, which is very emotional because remember, Nemesis is the cop guy from the last movie who she knew for almost 3 hours. Jill and Carlos, who are the main heroes of this story in the game, spend this portion of the movie handcuffed on the ground while Alice wrecks Nemesis with her bare hands. She only stops when she looks into his eyes and remembers all the good times they shared, and she loves him and can't fight him anymore. Umbrella Guy instructs small Nemesis to kill her, but then he also remembers that love is stronger than any virus, so he's able to overpower his programming and kill these guys here instead of Alice. It's obviously a very touching moment, but again, I don't think a gun like this is accurate enough to kill these two guys and not hit Alice at all. So then everyone starts shooting, Alice's friends get free in the chaos, and Umbrella Man attempts an escape.
Why haven't you been taking off? Because I usually drive a Cadillac.
Oh, no way! He's gonna use the Golden Desert Eagles, isn't he? No, he dropped them earlier to get Nemesis to leave him alone, so I guess they're gone. Some more great stuff here, a couple nods to Code Veronica.
There was an important scene in the game where there's a helicopter gunship strafing across a glass corridor with Alice running through it.
No, that isn't Alice. There's no Alice in the games. That's Claire Redfield. God, how did they let this incompetent moron anywhere near this movie? I'm filing a lawsuit. Well, Nemesis/Cop Guy is hastily written out of the franchise right here. As more and more zombies begin to close in, our beloved heroes limp to the chopper and get in the air just in time to avoid a nuclear blast. Oh, not quite actually. It kind of hits them and makes everything super difficult. A piece of debris is about to fly into Angie's face, but Alice can see it with her superior reflexes and has enough time to catch the debris. I mean, jump in front of it and get impaled, and then the helicopter crashes. Don't worry though, a couple hours later when the Umbrella Boys check out the crash, the only body they find is Alice. All your favorites got away just fine. And your actual favorite, Alice, is also okay. Better than okay. This guy, Dr. Isaacs, who picked her body up from the crash site, rebuilt her and is intending to use her abilities for bad guy things. But Alice's brain is simply too strong and she overpowers the Umbrella programming and retains her free will, using it to beat up all the doctors in the room. She's also immune to tasers, so when this guy tries to use one on her, she simply throws them right back at him. As she strolls on out of the building, a guard in a security room spots her on the camera and raises the alarm. In response, Alice uses the Force to reach through the security camera and melt his brain.
but we certainly did a lot of research and development on how to make his head explode. I think it actually would have tipped it into a bit of unintentional comedy, and which we didn't want.
Yeah, no, we definitely wouldn't want that, would we, Paul? When she gets out of the building, there's like 26 guys there ready to shoot her, but before she can melt their brains, Jill, Carlos, and this guy, who is named LJ, have somehow become Special Ops Umbrella's secret agents. And Carlos is like, we'll take it from here, boys.
Level 6 authorization.
Yeah, level 6 authorization. That's how you know it's serious. Has it been years since we last saw these people? Who let this guy be any kind of secret agent? Okay, they also still have the little girl with them, and she doesn't seem any older, so I guess it hasn't been that long. Is she a secret agent too? Well, who cares? We thought our friends were out of the woods and everyone became a secret agent or superhero or whatever, but as the saying goes, you can take Alice out of Umbrella, but you can't take Umbrella out of Alice. She's actually still under their control and her friends have no idea. There's even a satellite. Movie end. There's so much smoking in this movie, it reminds me of back in the day. Otherwise, this is much less of a horror movie than the first, but that's fine because the horror is replaced by insane action scenes that were dreamt up by a kid from a Hot Wheels commercial. It's bigger, it's badder, it takes place primarily outside, which is a pleasant contrast to the last movie. This time we have a few beloved characters from the games, which is fun. I think they're pretty well cast. Jill, she looks the part. The characterization's definitely a bit off. I don't feel like this era of Jill was so tough and angsty, but she is, insanely hot. They're really starting to ramp up the earnest stupidity that had me eventually fall in love with these movies. There's a real confidence that only continues to grow from here. Confidence is one of the keys to ending up on the top of the bell curve. See, like they brought back the same dog from the last movie, and look how much more confident she is. For this one part here, they had a real stunt performer actually run down the side of a building, and then Milla Jovovich did like a third of it herself. It's a huge bonus to be able to see the lead actor actually doing an action scene. Movies are almost always improved when the main character's face doesn't have to be hidden so much. And it's pretty cool watching her hype herself up before an action scene. I never understood why everyone thinks Milla Jovovich is so hot, but I gotta say this. Yeah, kinda doing it for me. The score is not as good. Kinda weird that the last movie had a famous rock star and a well-known composer do the score, and now with a higher budget, they just went with some guy. I like the song and the credits, but overall the music is definitely weaker. I also really liked how in the commentary track, Paul W.S. Anderson can't go 5 seconds without mentioning John Carpenter.
John Carpenter.
Yeah, it's really, really...
Carpenter's present in all of the games. John Carpenter's greatest hits, the Carpenter movies, Assault on Precinct 30,
Prince of
Darkness, Escape from New York. I mean, it's pure John Carpenter.
Wow, he's just like me. So you're probably thinking at this point, like I was, wait, there are 4 more movies after this? Where could things possibly go from here? Well, buckle up and say goodbye to the grounded and realistic nature of these first 2 films. It's about to get weird.
Sorry about this, Stevie.
One thing I think has always been neat about the Resident Evil games, something that really sets them apart from most zombie media, is that they take place in a regular modern-day world, not a zombie apocalypse. Sure, crazy things happen all the time, but every zombie or monster situation, no matter how big it is always isolated, usually to a small location, but even if there's catastrophic destruction in a major city, the rest of the world continues to spin. We usually only get glimpses of normal everyday life in the games, but aside from the odd sci-fi floating city, the world seems quite similar to ours. And I think that makes it more fun, but Polly Walnuts here didn't agree, and you know what? I actually like the direction these movies decided to go in, so who am I to question the great man? This is a post-apocalypse movie. It's a bit less like your standard zombie apocalypse and a bit more like Mad Max with zombies. You see, the giant explosion from the last movie actually failed to contain the T-virus, so everyone in the world turned into zombies, aside from a few survivors. But also the T-virus caused all the water to dry up and the plants to die.
The virus didn't just wipe out human life. Lakes and rivers dried up, forests became deserts, and whole continents were reduced to nothing more than barren wastelands.
Does that mean the trees got infected with the T-virus? And the lakes? I feel like if 99% of humans were wiped off the face of the earth, the trees and lakes would probably be pretty happy. But before we even learn any of this, we open on Alice back at the mansion, still not in focus. She of course wants to escape and ends up going through the laser hallway, but eventually ends up losing to a spinny bullet disc. Turns out this was just a test, and this is just a clone of Alice. Dr. Isaacs, from the end of the last movie, rolls up and says something about more tests. Then these guys take the body up an elevator outside into a shack that's hiding the entrance to their secret underground lab. They toss the clone body into this giant pit of Alice, which is right next to a horde of zombies who are trying to break down what appears to be a pretty weak chain link fence. So already I'm like, why just leave this pile of bodies out here to rot? It would probably be a pretty unpleasant smell when you have to go outside and get into your helicopter, but again, I'm much more concerned with how many zombies are gathering around this weak fence. And in any case, it just doesn't seem like a very scientific way of disposing of test subjects. You don't have any kind of incinerator in that fancy lab down there? Additionally, the subterfuge of this just being a tiny abandoned weather shack is completely blown. Anyone passing by is going to see the giant pile of identical corpses wearing the same conspicuous outfit. Pretty much like everybody in the world wears clothes like this now. So anyone in a nice red dress is going to stand all the way out, let alone 100 of them in a giant pit, so why even bother with the disguise? Just make this an obvious secure facility with a strong fence. But we catch up with the real Alice, who's out looting, scavenging, getting ambushed by raiders, general post-apocalypse activities. This one lady hands Alice a fake baby as a distraction, but I was really hoping it was going to be a zombie baby. Alice has left her friends from the last movie because she realized how powerful she was, but also that Umbrella's able to control her brain. So she set out on her own in fear of what she might do to those she loves so dearly. It's a lot to have happen off screen even before you throw in the fall of civilization. Plus, this is easily Alice's worst hair. Elsewhere in the Southwest, we catch up with our other survivors from the last movie. Well, just Carlos and LJ. There's absolutely no mention of what happened to Angie or Jill Valentine. These guys are now part of a nomadic convoy along with a fun cast of side characters. Someone played by Ashanti, a girl named Kmart.
What's your name?
Kmart.
And Claire Redfield, who's played by Ali Larter. This really hits home for me because when I first watched Final Destination, I was sure that Ali Larter's character in that movie was named Clear Rivers. But all my friends started dogging on me because Clear clearly isn't a name. She's clearly called Claire. But alas, I was right. Her character is indeed named Clear Rivers in those movies. But I'm finally able to let go of my resentment over nobody believing me, as I've now realized that they all must have thought we were watching the movie Resident Evil Extinction, where her name is in fact Claire. There's still no mention of Chris Redfield, and aside from them dyeing her hair auburn or whatever, she doesn't really look or act much like Claire. Something weird I noticed in this movie is that a lot of the women, especially Mila Jovovich, appear to be digitally airbrushed. Did they put them in like grimy post-apocalypse makeup and then test audiences didn't think they looked feminine enough, so they tried to change it in post? It's like one of those old episodes of Star Trek where they had to put that filter on the camera whenever they did a close-up of a wrinkly old hag. Then we see deep underground, there's like a boardroom where everyone's mad at Dr. Isaacs because he's supposed to have fixed the world by now. And look who's down here. Why, it's Wesker. He doesn't really look great. I don't mind that the hairline is different, but giving him a buzz cut is not the move. In fact, there's a zombie earlier on in the movie that looks like a dead ringer for Wesker in the original game's live-action opening. The performance isn't very good either, but he gets a lot better in the later movies. I am happy that they have him permanently in sunglasses even though he lives in an underground bunker. Dr. Isaacs is still the main bad guy of this movie, and he's named after Jason Isaacs, who played a doctor in the first movie. And, just like Carlos, Jason Isaacs was in Star Trek Discovery.
Elon Musk.
The zombies are getting more intelligent, which is kind of something that happens in the games. In the games, it's really more the result of developing different viruses and parasites, and it's not an evolution of the T-virus in the game. I'll let you guess how much all that matters to me. There's this fun scene, which is exactly just a scene from Day of the Dead, but I thought it was slightly funnier in this movie because the zombies playing with the little preschool toys. I love that Umbrella's so absurdly powerful and advanced that they can keep all this infrastructure going and all these people devoted to them during the post-apocalypse, but they still have to buy Sony electronics. One morning, the caravan wakes up to an abundance of hungry zombie crows. They attempt to fend them off, but there's like thousands of them and people are dying, and hey, what's even the point of shooting at these things with a gun? Even if every bullet is a kill shot, it's not gonna do anything against this epic murder as a whole. You're just wasting valuable ammo. Thankfully, they realize that the flamethrower is the only way to get anything done, but the crows are way too smart for this, and they just kill the flamethrower guy and turn the flamethrower back on our heroes. Carlos is about to get fully flamed, but thankfully Alice shows up at the last second and saves him with the Force. Carlos looks over and sees her and goes, "God, that's hot." Then Alice shoots the fire into the sky and burns all the crows to death. Dr. Isaacs is still underground, and there's another hologram girl helping him with his research or some shit. This is the White Queen, sister of the Red Queen. Cool! Alice explains to the survivors that she's sorry for leaving, but she was afraid of her powers and didn't want Umbrella to take control of her mind and kill everyone. But now she's figured out how to not for that to happen.
Broke into an Umbrella facility and hacked into their computers, downloaded the satellite trajectories, and stayed off the grid.
I like all these sets and vehicles and everything a lot. I mean, it's not the most inspired Mad Max ripoff I've ever seen, but there's a lot of genuine craftsmanship in the visuals, just like the last two movies. And these guys make no secret of this being a Mad Max-inspired setting, but I think Mad Max Fury Road might have actually stolen a shot from this movie. And Zombieland stole the yellow Hummer from this movie. This is clearly one of the most influential films of the 21st century, which is why I was not at all surprised to find countless interviews with cinema legends explaining how the industry would have completely collapsed back then if it hadn't been for this movie. They have some kind of notebook that seems to indicate that there's a town in Alaska where people are safe, and the group basically decides, yeah, we don't really have anything better to do, so they move to head to Alaska. As they stop in Vegas for a little R&R, they're ambushed by a bunch of Dr. Isaacs' newer, faster, more intelligent zombies. It turns out when Alice used the Force powers to kill all the crows earlier, that allowed Umbrella to get a location on her. I guess that answers why she didn't use her powers against the Raiders earlier in the movie. I guess. They kind of give Alice this lone gunslinger look, and they film her as such a lot. It's pointless, but it's fun. She's Clint Eastwood, but she's also Jean Grey. And I love the look of Vegas here. Paul W.S. Anderson, who was still wrapping up There Will Be Blood, couldn't direct this movie, but he did still write it. And he said he was inspired by being in Vegas when there was a sandstorm and being surprised about how much sand piled up everywhere, and he was imagining how quickly Vegas would get buried with nobody there to clean up all the sand. Is it scientifically accurate? Who knows? Is it fun and creative? Heck yeah. Again, very influential on the best movies of the 21st century. I think it all looks really good and still holds up. This big miniature set I really love, that helps it look way more real. They built a couple of full-size replicas of some stuff like the bridge from the Venetian. They really get their money's worth out of the bridge, which, I get it, you're proud of your bridge. See, action scenes like this, even if they're far from perfect, they're the result of tons of people from different departments working closely together to plan and execute them. The action isn't just handed off to a third-party CGI company to crank out a PS3 cutscene as quickly as possible. Yeah, you've seen better action movies, but ask yourself, how many movies in the theater have you actually seen lately that have better action than this? So a while back, LJ got bitten, and he hasn't told anyone, even though he's clearly dying. He does use one of his gold deagles in the scene where he's bit. Not very satisfying, and I don't know how he got it back after what happened in the last movie. During all the chaos of the zombies in Vegas, he succumbs to his zombieism and unfortunately also bites Carlos. This guy from Star Trek Discovery who plays Carlos, Oded Fair, I find him extremely likable. He's so likable, in fact, that Carlos is a way more important character in these movies than he is in the games. So I was legitimately sad when he got bit. I mean, he got bit in the last movie too, but they had the antivirus with them back then.
Should've told me you got bit, motherfucker. I'm hanging with you and shit.
This time, his fate is sealed. And what's really unfortunate on top of all of this is that Dr. Isaacs has re-established control of Alice's mind and has her frozen in place, helpless while so many of her friends are dying around her. How's she gonna get out of this one? Easy. She just utilizes her superior willpower, and while still incapable of moving her body, she is able to reach into space and short out the satellite that's controlling her mind. And then this is probably my favorite scene in the movie. Dr. Isaacs and his computer guys are trying to re-establish a connection to Alice, and then it's revealed that they're actually stationed on a nearby rooftop. Once they do have visual established again, they quickly realize, holy shit, she knows exactly where we are and she's right outside the tent. This movie was kind of boring overall, so this one big oh shit moment was really enjoyable. She blasts everyone in the tent, but apparently Isaac somehow slipped out without her knowing and boards a nearby helicopter, and he's bit by a zombie on his way up, but he does get away. Wow, so back in the editing chair, I realized that this zombie is the same one he was doing tests on earlier. And if that's not filmmaking, I don't know what is. There's a pointless slow-mo shot of this helicopter flying away that actually slows down even more, and when I say pointless, the point is because it's cool! The group then follows Isaacs to the very secret hidden facility, and since Carlos is already dying, they all decide he's gonna take the war rig and smash down the fence and explode all the zombies. Again, I was legitimately sad about Carlos's death, but it ends up being a pretty good one. He crashes the war rig a little early, but still within range, and before he lights the dynamite that he's supposed to light, he finds a fat spliff that LJ left behind, so he gets to go out smoking some of that green herb from the games. All things considered, not a bad way to go. I just think this moment would have been a little better if he had lit the joint first, then taken a puff, then lit the dynamite with the already lit joint. Instead, he just lights the dynamite with the lighter, then lights the joint with the lighter. Good moment, but you should have called me before you filmed it, Paul. We could have put this one over the top. Also, we should have blown out a cloud of smoke that says "fuck zombies." Claire Claire and the rest of the survivors, who are mostly children, get on the chopper to fly to Alaska, but Alice gives the Alaska notebook to Kmart and tells them that she has to finish this and they need to fly to Alaska without her. Her and Claire say a warrior's goodbye and the survivors are off. Okay, now I don't know much about aviation, but I don't think a helicopter, especially with this many people, could fly from the American Southwest to Alaska without needing to refuel a couple of times. And I don't know where they're planning on doing that. Well, it's actually a super advanced umbrella copter that's solar powered and the T-virus makes it 400 times more fuel efficient. Yeah, you know what? Fair enough, Paul. Like I said, I'm no expert. Before going underground, Alice catches a glimpse of the clone pit and decides to use the extra rage to her advantage. On her way down, she becomes friends with the White Queen because she believes Alice's blood can be used to make a cure and save the world. I don't know what, but apparently these little girl supercomputers do actually care about preserving humanity. That can mean locking Alice and her friends in an underground lab and gassing the place to stop any potential infected from getting out, but it can also mean helping Alice find a cure. She ends up in the room where she's being cloned, which leads to the replica of the mansion where Dr. Isaacs, after injecting himself with an overdose of the antivirus earlier, has now become a super zombie, who basically looks like the tyrant from the first game. Hero and villain facing down at last. There are some more cool and very realistic action moments. Isaacs claims to be unkillable.
I can't die.
Their fight eventually takes them into the laser hallway, and before it starts powering up, we get another classic mid-tier one-liner.
I am the future.
You're just another asshole.
And a decent callback to that other classic moment.
And we're both gonna die down here.
But despite all of Isaacs' insistence that he's unkillable, the laser grids right up this time and he is cubed just like any man. The grid stops right before hitting Alice because who's at the control panel? Why, it's Alice. One of her clones got up and knew she had to help a sister out. Hard cut to Tokyo, which is also full of zombies. Underground, the board members discuss next steps now that Isaacs is probably dead and now Wesker is in charge. And that's just fine with Alice, who gets on the hologram and says her and a couple of friends are coming to pay Wesker a visit. We close things out on a shot pulling back through a room full of bloodthirsty Alice clones. Yeah, baby, we are 3 for 3 with these movies, in terms of Mila Jovovich getting naked. Otherwise, this was definitely my least favorite so far. The plot is paper thin, a lot of the interesting stuff happened off screen between movies, characters are gone with no explanation, there aren't any Vegas-themed zombies, and I just found it to be a bit meandering. There is still some fun action and cool shots. It made sense when I found out the composer of this movie also did the music for Saw, good stuff. And this is the final movie in the series to be shot on film, which is a shame. Also, I guess I should mention that the director of this movie is the director of the first 2 Highlander movies. I've never seen those, but I'm sure somebody out there will be glad I mentioned that. But you know, I can really appreciate that this franchise decided to go in a radically different direction than the games. The first movie was kind of like the first game, and the second movie was kind of like the third game. This movie is not anything like any Resident Evil game whatsoever. And I respect that they realized turning these games into movies wasn't what the people were paying to see. Maybe it's what fans of the games would have preferred, but these movies' audience, for better or worse, has grown past the game's fanbase. At this point, if you go into the theater expecting one of these movies to be a recreation of the games in any way, that's on you. And still, I just don't see why anybody would want that. I really have no interest in stuff like The Last of Us TV show, even the first season that people liked. It's just the story of the game again, but you don't play it? And I just don't get why fans of any game would want that either. Although I will admit at this point, I was starting to get a little tired of these movies. This one wasn't as fun, and I was not looking forward to watching 3 more Mad Max knockoffs. But little did I know, the fun was just beginning.
Sir, our men are still up there.
This is probably the best movie I've ever seen in my life. When people talk about the greatest films of all time, they're usually referring to the cinematic equivalent of a 5-star meal. Beautifully presented, nutritionally balanced, complementary, harmonious flavors, complex and deliberate mouthfeel, and made by one of the most talented chefs of all time. But there are other kinds of amazing meals. Sometimes you're in a 5-star restaurant in Old Paris, and sometimes you're just standing in your kitchen at 1:30 in the morning and you want to little snack. So without overthinking it, you just start throwing together things you like into a giant pile of food. And then you start going crazy on it. And you're standing there, entranced, in awe of how delicious this overwhelming combination of sugary and salty flavors is activating the most primal areas of your brain, and if anyone saw you engaging with this meal, you'd look like the little kid from Bring Her Back. That's what watching this movie felt like. Not something that stands as an amazing cohesive work, but a collection of unbelievably decadent scenes that all happen to be connected by some kind of loose plot. So after There Will Be Blood failed to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, Paul W.S. Anderson decided to return to familiar territory and would eventually direct all of the remaining movies in this franchise. What's also important to note is that Paul W.S. Anderson and Milla Jovovich started dating shortly after the first movie, and during the first two sequels they dated on and off for a few years, but between the last movie and this movie, the two of them had gotten married and had a kid. So if you thought these movies were in love with Alice before, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Hello. I'm Milla Jovovich.
We kick the movie off with the best opening credits scene in the whole franchise. Tokyo, Japan, night. Rain begins to fall over a busy Shibuya square. Umbrellas fill the streets as people hurry about, oblivious to the tiny woman standing in the crosswalk getting drenched. Excellent overhead shot. Now cue the sick-ass music. Yeah, there we go. Slowing it down. Fuck yeah, Resident Evil Afterlife. Tom and Andy, never heard of them. Great music in this movie, though. After many more indulgent slow-mo shots, she finally turns around, picks a guy out of the crowd, and starts going crazy on his neck, for she is a zombie. This leads to an epic zoom-out of all the lights in the world going offline, starting from Shibuya Square in Japan. Sorry, wait, I thought the outbreak started in Raccoon City.
Raccoon City was just the beginning.
I guess it also happened to start the same day in Tokyo. We come right back to Tokyo 4 years later and go into Umbrella's big underground facility. Wesker's getting an evil report from General Veers. Right off the bat, his look and performance are a lot better in this one. I totally buy this version of Wesker now.
All data will be transferred to this facility, and the research will continue under my personal supervision.
Besides, I always knew you'd be drawn to your friends.
They have to put their evil on hold because dudes are getting killed around the facility. And I think you know who it is doing the killing. Look at this Umbrella motor pool with these Umbrella Hummers. That's cool. Green screens are becoming more and more prominent for larger environments in these movies, but there is still a ton of great sets being filmed. The security guards are tragically unprepared to deal with Alice at full power. She shows up rocking double katanas and a new black slicked back ponytail look. Not her best look, but I'm sure it made copy and pasting Milla Jovovich a lot easier, and she wrecks house here all the same. She starts with a few ninja stars, then goes into a series of decapitations, a couple impalings, guns a few down with one of their own guns, then gets the last guy with a broken sword through the skull. This whole thing is reminiscent of an alternate ending that they didn't use for the first movie, where she also does a head-on assault of Umbrella headquarters. But these guys were just round one. Reinforcements quickly show up, and even though she's out of weapons, she's gotten way better with the Force and takes out round two with little more than a snap of her fingers. As round 3 rolls in, Alice... Oh my god! Nah, you know exactly where this is going. 3 more Alices step out of the shadows. They make short work of these guards with a slow-mo bullet transition back to Wesker. All the stuff with the clones in this part is incredible. I don't want to show you too much of it because you should really watch this movie, but this is exactly what was promised at the end of the last one. I do, however, have one massive complaint. It really irks me how the texture of the glass here is like cracked from the bullets, but then when the glass shatters, those parts that are cracked don't shatter. They just stay as a full piece of glass with a cracked texture on it. I'm pretty forgiving of the effects in these movies, arguably too forgiving, but this is a bridge too far. See how the green screen effect around the clones here looks pretty terrible? I don't even care about that. It's just the glass thing, I can't get over it. Anyway, it's still cool. All the clones seem to be just as powerful as the real Alice. Milla Jovovich, of course, did most of the stunts for this scene, but she also kept track of every single clone and gave them all slightly different personalities. This is just epic. I can't wait to see what Wesker comes up with to try to defeat an entire army of Alice. Oh, he nukes every single one of them in the opening scene and then injects the real Alice with anti-superhero serum? That's a shame. I mean, at least they didn't totally ignore the ending, and this one scene is appropriately insane and hilarious, but I thought the rest of the series was gonna have an army of Alice, or at least the entire next movie. When I first watched this, it wasn't even clear until later that those were all the clones, and there will not be any more. I mean, there do end up being more in the next movie, but they aren't the same kind of clones. It's we'll get to it. I also didn't realize that this was supposed to be the real Alice until the movie started following her and there was no other Alice. I mean, sure, you could say her hair is different from all the other clones, but it's also just as different from her hair in the last movie. And I know Wesker says,
"How nice to finally meet the real you."
But I thought he just meant that because she was depowered. I guess I'm the idiot. When about to kill the real Alice on the airplane, he gets distracted monologuing and the plane crashes. Oh, cool. Yeah, this is slow-mo right here. Yeah. Cool. Couple hours later, Alice comes to with Wesker nowhere to be found. Do you remember how in the last movie they lived in a Mad Max world? Lakes and rivers had dried up, they showed all the forests in North America and South America disappearing and the whole world becoming a desert? Well, don't. 6 months later, Alice is flying over this lush, dense forest on her way to Arcadia, Alaska, where Claire and Kmart and the rest of the survivors were heading in the last movie. So the ecological collapse was a bit exaggerated, I guess. They just happened to be hanging out in Mad Max land and didn't ever decide to venture north and check things out. They just looked at the Mojave Desert and said, yeah, the whole world's probably like this. No reason to think it would be any less dead in the Pacific Northwest or the rainforest or anything. Well, Alice lands in this really neat airplane graveyard and she finds the umbrella copter, but no Claire, no Kmart, no anyone. So she watches the sunset and reflects on things. On her way back to the plane, she's attacked by Claire, who's wearing one of those mind control spiders that Jill was wearing in Resident Evil 5, the game. So Alice removes it, making Claire not bad anymore, but she has amnesia. For some reason I can't remember, Alice thinks the move is flying to LA, and just like the last movie, I don't think a plane this size could make it from Alaska to Southern California on one tank of gas, and finding space to land a plane is way harder than trying to find space to land a helicopter. When they get to LA, the city somehow looks perfectly normal. Like Las Vegas in the last movie got completely buried under sand and was destroyed, but LA looks exactly like it does right now. The only inaccuracy is the big CGI building that's not there in real life. There are a couple survivors on the roof, so Alice decides to land this plane on the roof. It's just as stupid as you'd expect. They even try to do the thing where they want you to think they've crashed, but at the last second they fly up and they're okay. Oh my god. As they're crash landing, the plane is about to fall off the other side of the building, but this guy runs up, leaps through the air like Michael Jordan, and grabs the tail of the plane, allowing everyone else to pull it back from the edge.
I mean, it's pure John Carpenter.
It's established soon that he used to be a famous basketball player, so this is actually extremely realistic. They ask Alice if she's from Arcadia, and she's like, damn it, I was hoping you were from Arcadia. Turns out Arcadia is actually a ship that's been stopped along the coast for a few weeks, and these survivors have been trying to contact it. So in the last movie's world, everyone dressed like this. Now we have people still in their work clothes as if the apocalypse started like 3 days ago, when in fact this very movie tells us it's been over 4 years. Also, I don't think this guy's tall enough to be in the NBA. I mean, no shade, he's plenty tall and very, very good looking, but just not NBA tall. But this is actually an extremely vital scene because it's where we learn the only thing we will ever learn about Alice as a person in any of these movies.
You like basketball?
Not really.
Yep, that's it. 6 movies, and that's the only thing we will ever know about her. She doesn't really like basketball. That evening, as everyone bonds over dinner, Alice says they need to get out of this prison and get to that boat. And it turns out there's only one guy who knows how to get out of this prison. That's the guy from Prison Break. It's not a joke. I know I make a joke every now and then in these videos, but there's a time and a place for humor, and it would be inappropriate to make light of what's happening here. They need to break out of the prison, so they go downstairs to see the guy from Prison Break who's in a prison in a prison. And his first line is literally, what is this, some kind of prison break?
I know a way out of this place.
That's verbatim. This is Wentworth Miller, best known for the TV show Prison Break. In this movie, he's playing Chris Redfield, one of, if not the most important characters in the games. He claims to have gotten locked up in here during a prison break, where he was here with the military and the prison breakers locked him in this cage thinking he was a guard, and when the rest of the survivors found him, they didn't believe his story. But Alice is less sure about him. She thinks he seems on the level. I gotta say, this guy doesn't look much like Chris Redfield, but I personally think this is one of the strongest casting choices for a game character in any of these movies. He's certainly not yoked out like we see Chris these days, but he really nails the younger Chris balance between tough and grizzled and friendly older brother. He's got a lot of charisma, this guy. Also, I always thought he looked like a much bigger M&M, like a peanut M&M. This prison really is a who's who of guys from shows I haven't finished. Guy from Prison Break, guy from Last Man on Earth, guy from Sons of Anarchy, guy from The Flash, guy from Legends of Tomorrow.
What do you see when you look into my eyes?
The umbrella logo. The next morning, Alice goes to take a shower. Her new romantic chemistry is with the basketball player Luther because, yeah, he knows it's only a matter of time before he gets into her pants, so he happily leaves her to her privacy. Him raising the torch like this is to symbolize an erection. But something is amiss in the shower room. Somebody is here. A zombie? A Frankenstein? Actually, it's the bald guy from earlier. Turns out he's a creepy pervert trying to catch a glimpse of Alice's Wonderland. If you pay attention earlier, you can see him reading a porn. Dude, if you want to see Milla Jovovich naked, just check out the Resident Evil movies. But then also zombies, and they eat this guy. They have a big face mouth like in Resident Evil 5, and they kill him with it. Alice is fine, of course. The whole group comes in to inspect the hole where the zombies came from. Insane zoom here, Paul. This kind of shot can work, especially if you do it in camera, but it looks way too artificial here to do anything for me. Alice is like, okay, this place is full of zombies. Time to take our chances with Chris. And of course, when they let him out, he turns out to be no threat to them. Lovely moment there. This guy's very charming. But then Alice steps aside and Chris sees Claire, and he's like, holy crap, that's my sister. Claire still has amnesia about him though. Hopefully she's considered the astronomical odds of them ending up in the same room several years into an apocalypse. It's basically impossible that this guy is actually her brother as he claims to be. I mean, he is, but that's beside the point, you know? But all the zombies are getting in, so all the good guys have to get out. This armored car they were planning on escaping in turns out to be busted. So while Chris and Alice and Chris, Yeah, Chris. This girl's also named Chris. Why would you do that? You're already fighting an uphill battle trying to get me to care about these one-dimensional characters. Don't make it even harder for me to remember who's who. Okay, slow down. Girl Chris, in the credits, it turns out her name is Crystal Waters. Tell me that's not a reference to Clear Rivers. I fucking dare you to tell me that. So these three are swimming through very unclear waters to get to the prison armory. Originally, it was planned to be completely clean water, but on the day, they didn't give the paint enough time to dry, so the water got super cloudy, and Paul Verhoeven was kind of pissed since they had no time to start over and ended up just having to shoot in the cloudy water, but then he thought the scene actually turned out a lot better. And this is one of the points I'm trying to make with these stupid movies, is that when the filmmaking process isn't so sanitized and controlled, sure, things can go horribly wrong, but happy accidents can just as often improve a movie in a way you didn't expect. The cloudy water makes way more sense. Not that sense has ever been a concern of these movies, but more importantly, it makes the scene more tense and scary. Plus, forget about the zombies, you're definitely gonna get several deadly infections from swimming in that water. Also, you would drown in this situation. Girl Chris gets eaten the second they're out of the water, which is a relief. This character, who's supposed to be a movie producer, decides he's gonna take the plane and get the F out of there and screw everyone else, which means he has to shoot this guy.
What do we do now?
I know.
This comes out of absolutely nowhere and happens so fast. I mean, this guy was an asshole in the movie, but there were no hints that he was considering murdering anyone. See, though, if they had set this up properly, when he did shoot this guy, I would have gone, oh yeah, that's what they've been setting up this whole time. But since it happened completely out of nowhere, with no setup, I was far more entertained. And this is why bad movies are actually good movies. His assistant doesn't want to abandon the group, so when everyone else turns up on the rooftop, he just takes off and somehow doesn't crash. Great shot right here. I mean, it looks pretty bad, but, you know, fun stuff. And another one of many examples of, hey, I liked when that happened in another movie, so I'm just gonna do it in my movie. He's like Tarantino in that way. So everyone's only chance now is to get out through the zombie hole. Chris goes first, then Luther, but the assistant is too afraid to get into the hole. His hesitation ends up being his undoing when one of those giant executioner guys from Resident Evil 5 shows up and slices him right in half, kicking off what is considered by the American Film Institute to be the greatest scene in the history of cinema. Alice and Claire are utterly unprepared for this. Alice tries all her standard opening moves, but this guy incapacitates her almost immediately, leaving Claire to fend for herself in a fight scene that is entirely in slow motion. The big guy smashes all the pipes in the room while chasing Claire, leading the entire scene to become soaking wet. She does everything she can to stop this guy, but he just keeps getting back up. It's actually pretty admirable how long they hold on these shots, and the music has that perfect balance of corny but hard as fuck. We got a bunch of slow-mo shots of wet, sexy ladies getting wet. The big guy is hands down the best recreation of a monster from the games. They've had dogs, lickers, Nemesis, a tyrant, and they all looked somewhere between bad and okay. But this guy looks completely flawless. It's just a big stunt performer in a cool costume that they made even bigger with a little digital trickery and in-camera effects. The scene just goes on in the most extravagant way possible. When it seems like Claire finally brings him down for good, No, of course she didn't, because Claire isn't allowed to win a fight. Nobody is allowed to win a fight except for Alice. She is my wife. She is the mother of my children. Nobody on this earth could possibly hold a candle to her beauty, her grace, her strength. Ali Larder, you're fired.
I'm Mila Jovovich.
You know, this is as good a time as any to address a criticism I see a lot about these movies. It seems a lot of people on the internet think that Alice is one of the biggest Mary Sues of all time. And I can't necessarily disagree with that, but I feel like a Mary Sue is only a problem when I'm expected to take them seriously. If you want me to relate to a character and have me empathize with their plight and struggles, convince me that they're facing real internal and external challenges, believe in their lows and highs, and get invested in how they're going to grow as a person, that's gonna be pretty hard when they're always really amazing at everything and everyone loves them and trusts them right away all the time. But if the point of your character is for me to go, I like when she shoots the zombies, then she jumps off the roof and exploded all the zombies, then she pulled out the gun and it looked super cool when she shot the zombies in slow motion, and then she threw the guns and then she took out the guns and it looked super awesome, then I don't give a care if anything about them is physically or emotionally realistic. I'm glad they dropped the pretense and just serve up this sugary abomination. Her lack of vulnerability isn't some kind of betrayal or hindrance to the story's premise, it is the story's premise. These movies never ask you to believe anything about her character is earned, she simply is. Sure, she technically lost her powers at the beginning of the movie, but she's still presented as more mythic than ever before. She also still has pretty much zero personality or backstory. And again, I don't care. Just show me her pulling out the shotguns again. Hell yeah. This matter has now been resolved. Oh, and I thought you'd enjoy this. When you go to Paul W.S. Anderson's Wikipedia page and scroll down to personal life, all it says is, he is married to Mila Jovovich and they have 3 kids. So I guess that kind of makes her a Mary Sue in real life also. They actually do make it out of the prison after this. They lose Luther to zombies, but don't worry, he's gonna come back at the end of the movie. So the last of the group, Alice and the Redfields, make their way onto the freighter, only to discover a horrible Umbrella Company secret. This boat is pretending to want to help survivors, but they instead just pick them up and use them as lab rats. And so Claire's memory comes back and she tells them, oh, the boat, I remember everything, that's what happened, oh my god. They find Kmart and bust her out of cold storage. Chris and Claire decide to tend to her, completely ignoring her friends, Ross Dress for Less, Dollar General, Motel 6, and Waffle House. Alice ventures further into the lab. I always love a pristine futuristic lab juxtaposed with blood and monsters. She finds Wesker in the back with the producer under mind control. There are some dogs, and we get another crazy-ass action scene. They lift a lot of shots directly from the game, which are even funnier in live action. This was during the 3D era, if that wasn't obvious. What makes it even funnier still is how serious Wesker looks while he's doing all this absurd shit. I find it unbelievable that this is the same guy that gave such a weak performance in the last movie, because I freaking love everything he does from this movie forward. Chris and Claire do pretty good against him, but if you've been paying attention, you know they're not gonna beat him. Alice has to beat him after she kicks a shard of glass into a dog. Of course, even after she blows the back of his head wide open, you know Wesker isn't gone for good. Once again, there's a lot of incredible stuff I didn't mention in this scene, so please watch the movie. I'm begging you, it's really, really good. Alice frees the Redfields from the tanks that Wesker put them in, and after freeing all the rest of the prisoners, well, of course, Wesker escapes on a plane, but Alice was finally ahead of him on this one and planted the same nuclear bomb from the beginning on his plane, and blows him up in a fun reversal of the opening scene. That's it from Wesker for this movie, but you know he's coming back. All the prisoners are enjoying some fresh air on the deck of the ship, and everyone's high-fiving, and Luther is alive. The camera starts to pull back, and the movie ends with an epic song by Tool or the Traveling Wilburys or something playing as a massive fleet of Umbrella crafts close in on the ship. We cut to credits there, but there is a mid-credit scene where who is in charge of this fleet? Why, it's Jill Valentine, and she's got the blonde ponytail, titties on display, and a mind control crab, just like the game that most of the stuff from this movie is from. She's mad that Alice stole her hairstyle. Boom. And that is Resident Evil Afterlife. It is now my favorite movie of all time. There's simply no way to understand the raw, unshackled, glorious stupidity of this movie without watching it yourself. Paul W.S. Anderson came back so strong. Alice has basically become the chosen one of this universe, and we still know almost nothing about her. It has a much more enjoyable cast than the last movie all around. Amazing music, so much slow-mo. If you loved this movie, you'll be happy to know that the next one gives us more of that good juice. If you didn't love this movie, then you are unfortunately not qualified to watch this channel. Make your next move very carefully.
What sells it for people is a sense of reality.
Resident Evil Retribution is another very solid entry in the Resident Evil film franchise. This is easily my second favorite movie in the series. It has everything: insane set pieces and creative action scenes, really stupid plot elements, fun one-note characters, and some really neat surprises. However, there is a bit of a been there, done that feeling to a couple of the moments. Not that anything feels stale per se, they're just playing a few of the hits again. But it doesn't take away from all the tasty goodness on offer. This movie also contains the most fan service out of any of these movies. Both fan service from the games and fan service from earlier movies in the series, and you can't wait to hear about it. The movie opens on a shot of Alice submerged in water, and it quickly becomes clear that we're watching the attack from the end of the last movie take place, but it's being played in reverse slow-mo. Then, after the "My name is Alice" previously on Resident Evil monologue that's become standard at this point, they make the extremely bold decision to just play the scene again, but in regular order with only some of it in slow-mo. The whole time I'm thinking, what happened to Chris and Claire Redfield, along with Kmart? Well, the answer is they are simply not there. After falling in the water, Alice awakens peacefully in bed, now with long blonde hair, living in a suburban neighborhood with her handsome husband Carlos, and a little girl who I think is deaf. A lot of A Quiet Place is actually a ripoff of Resident Evil Retaliation. Reincarnation? Revelations? What's this fucking movie called? Anyway, zombies show up and eat Carlos, so Alice has to escape with her daughter. The whole neighborhood is in chaos, and who should she run into? Letty. She's alive too, and is now a Prius-driving vegan. Prius doesn't make it very far, so Alice and her daughter run into a house and hide in the closet like Laurie Strode.
I mean, it's pure John Carpenter.
Alice kills the zombie that was following them, but then Carlos shows up and eats her. Then we cut back to who is the real Alice, who wakes up in yet another Umbrella facility wearing a napkin once again. There's some great shots of this room. Notice how in this overhead shot, you can see the logo being reflected on every wall. That's cool. Evil Jill pops in and says, "Why did you turn on Umbrella?" And Alice says, "What happened to Chris and Claire Redfield?" And Jill says, "Shut up!" Jill goes on torturing her for a while, asking her all kinds of stupid questions.
Why did you turn against Umbrella?
Because they're evil and the mind control stopped working.
Who do you work for?
What indication has there been at any point that she works for somebody? The design of this whole place, and this room in particular, is very neat. This logo really lends itself to some great shots like that. Pauly gets a lot of mileage out of this image, and I'll give him credit for this sequence of Jill torturing Alice. It's actually quite well directed and well edited, and a little disturbing. All of a sudden, the lights shut off, and a drawer opens with a sexy leather combat outfit in it, and a door opens for Alice to escape. Jill's actually fully shut down temporarily too, but then she wakes up with the umbrella eyes. They activate the laser hallway, starting with the grid this time. See, they're learning. Alice runs out of the hallway into Shibuya Square. Alice knows what a sketchy situation looks like right off the bat, so she grabs a bike lock and a magnum from a police car to defend herself. Then it starts raining, and the opening credit sequence from the previous movie starts playing out around her, complete with the same rainy girl and the same music. Soon zombies start happening, and they chase Alice back into the hallway. It's a great sequence of her killing them all with the bike chain and pistol. Lots of great framing in this scene. Again, I love the contrast of this graphic violence and these horrific monsters against this sterile environment, and I love the contrast of a bunch of color on a bunch of white. She kicks an ejected magazine into a zombie's face. She uses some zombies as stairs. We're off to a very strong start here. Would you believe me if I told you Milla Jovovich did this fight herself? Yeah. Then, just when you think it's over, like a million zombies show up and chase Alice into another room where we get some more great cinematography. See, this is the type of writing I really respect. You could just have her walk straight from the torture room into the office room, but where's the action in that? There isn't one. So instead, you have her step into a hallway, and then get chased out of the hallway, and then get chased back into the hallway, and then get chased back out of the hallway. That way it's not so boring. In here, she finds a bunch of dead Umbrella desk jockeys, then a rack of guns, then Ada Wong. She ends up having Leon's Resident Evil 4 fight with Ada. This woman who plays Ada, her name is Li Bingbing. She really looks the part. She does a lot of her own stunts, learned how to look cool with a gun, and generally acts well, but she's another great example of less than perfect characterization, lacking the mysterious femme fatale thing that was kind of her whole thing, but whatever. It turns out Wesker actually sent Ada here to help Alice break out. She's the person that executed everyone in this room. It's fun, and it allowed Wesker to remotely open Alice's cell. Supposedly, Wesker has turned a new leaf and is now concerned about the end of the human race, and if he wants to save everyone, there's no way to do it without Alice, as she's the most important person in the world. Wesker explains that they're in a facility that was built to test bioweapons, so they built replicas of cities to see what would happen if a bunch of zombies showed up. Everyone dies. And it doubles as a demonstration to sell the bioweapon to countries' governments, and apparently all the countries bought the zombie virus and used it on all the other countries, so now that's why the world is full of zombies. Oh, and also this facility is underwater. Suddenly, the Red Queen regains control of the systems. She's finally returned and she's more aggro than ever, delivering a really lame callback.
Project Alice. You're all going to die down here.
All two of them? Seriously, this feels so forced. I mean, you don't need to call back to that line if you don't have a good opportunity. Also, they have her turn her head to say the line like she did the original time, but in this one she was already facing Alice head on. Like, the reason she turned her head like that in the first movie is because she was a 3D hologram and they had moved to the side of her. Plus, it's scary in that one because you don't realize how aware she actually is until she looks directly at them. This is just a face on a screen and nobody moved at all, so she decided to turn away from them just so she could make a meal out of turning back to them and saying something that doesn't make sense. Oh, this shit is so stupid! How can you not be in love with this movie? Wesker also has a team on the surface who are supposed to rendezvous with Alice and Ada and help extract them.
I mean, it's pure John Carpenter.
They're going in through the only entrance. When they step out of their little snow cars, we see that the team consists of Luther from the last movie, as well as Leon Skennedy and Barry Burton. The Leon guy, again, he really looks the part. I do mostly buy this guy as an older Leon. He's got kind of a Wyatt Russell thing going. He's alright, I don't mind it. Barry is played by Kevin Durand, who I always think is a bit of an underrated actor. This guy's great. He seems a little young to play Barry, though. There's really nothing Barry about him other than the outfit and the giant revolver, but I like Kevin Durand.
Elon Musk?
And it's fun to see things that vaguely resemble things I know. They just needed a bunch of dudes, so they decided to make some of them game characters. I like that. And there's also two randos with them. I don't know who they are. Maybe they're supposed to be those annoying guys from Revelations. They kind of reminded me of them. And anyway, they hack into the mainframe and head down the elevator, making short work of the guards awaiting them downstairs. God, look how jacked these guys are. Look at these fucking arms. In this universe, Leon is more jacked than Chris. Also, while these guys are like 6'8", I wanted to see them do a three-way Predator handshake. The overall sexiness of this particular cast is starting to reach dangerous levels. Everyone's such a hunk that it's ironic that the only game character that didn't make it into the movies is Hunnigan from Resident Evil 4. So the Red Queen, or a Red Queen, or some kind of Red Queen is helping Jill and Umbrella track Alice and kill the intruders. Umbrella is no longer a corporation, since those don't exist anymore. There are no more consumers to sell products to. So they're now just a supervillain organization with unlimited funding and resources. Alice and Ada have to move through several more simulations to get to the exit. It doesn't make much sense, but it's way more fun this way. That's actually the tagline for this movie. Their first stop is Times Square, where they run into not one, but two of the big executioner guys. And look, this scene is fun, but kind of feels like a lame attempt to outdo the shower fight from the last movie. And Paul, look, I get it, you want to improve with every movie, but that scene is the AFI's selection for the best movie scene of all time. You're not gonna top it, just try something else. They even use the exact same music from that scene, but there's a lot more cutting this time. They don't hold on these shots at all the way they did in the last movie. I mean, there are some neat visuals. One of these stunt performers is like the tallest man in Canada or something. It's all decent, but come on guys, you know you're better than this. I mean, there are a million bigger enemies from Resident Evil that haven't been in a movie yet. It's lame to just reuse this design. Also, these SMGs that Alice has, they're alright, but they got nothing on the sawed-off shotguns that shoot quarters. Bicep Squad is making their way through the Moscow simulation, and the Red Queen activates some of the Las Plagas zombies, which are one of the kinds of zombies that can use guns, and of course, since they're in Moscow, they're undead Red Army zombies. See, locally themed zombies, that's fun. Why couldn't the New York zombies have been like a giant John Gotti and a giant Rudy Giuliani? We're unfortunately seeing fewer and fewer models and miniatures in these movies, but they're still building tons of real sets, filming in real locations, shooting real stunts and special effects. These movies are not the green screen nightmares I was led to believe. Pretty much most of the time, it looks like someone's standing in a real place. Not 100% of the time, but most of the time. Imagine how cool a Resident Evil game set in an Umbrella holodeck facility could be. Alice and Ada get to suburbia, where Alice finds her dead clone, then her fake clone daughter hiding in the closet. This movie wants to give her some Ripley stuff to do, because I'm sure after having a bunch of kids with the guy who's directing the movie and having the kids on set had her feeling feeling very maternal, which I think is lovely. And stupid. We're also shown that Alice just knows sign language. I mean, yeah, were you expecting her to not be able to do something? These Alice clones don't seem to be like the other Alice clones. They don't appear to have any of her powers. It seems like these clones are just people they happen to have some extra DNA of and needed clones, so they were like, yeah, we'll just clone these guys. Well, as Alice mourns the life she never had, Ada tells them it's time to get a move on. But once outside, they're confronted by a myriad of ghosts from Alice's past. All bad this time. Just remember that most of these guys are evil clones of Alice's dead friends, but Jill here is the real Jill, just under mind control. It's very important to keep track of the deep lore. Ada holds them off while Alice and the little girl escape. Ada's okay though, she shoots a hole in the floor and gets out that way. Or she doesn't, because she's captured by them later, so I don't know. In Moscow, the boys are getting supremely overwhelmed. There's even a chainsaw guy, and he chainsaws one of the smaller guys. Kevin Durant snaps a zombie's neck, and suddenly the computer guy found him a way out of there. Cool. Alice and the girl have made it to the subway tunnels under Moscow, where they somehow run into the vegan Letty clone, and Alice just trusts her immediately, leaving the kid with her while she goes to locate Chad's squad. Those guys are walking through a quiet street when computer guy is suddenly snatched up by a giant licker who quickly gets the better of them until Alice pulls up in her Rolls Royce and saves the day. They all pile into the car, and the first thing Leon does is ask about Ada, but then the Red Army shows back up, and it's another decently fun action scene, definitely the kind of thing you don't see every day, and still a lot of it being done practically. A flaming zombie shooting rockets out of the back of a Jeep? You like this. The team escapes the super licker and catch back up with the little girl and Letty, so they begin heading out the way they came in. When they're at the elevator, almost home free, the super licker shows back up, slashes Barry, kidnaps the girl, and kills Letty by tossing her super hard. Look at his death face. Alice wants to go after the little girl. Leon tries to tell her they need to leave and get out of here, and this is where he gets to show off just how wooden his acting is.
Don't do this. You're more important than she is.
Although his biceps are still making me wooden. So yeah, Alice ignores him and goes after her. The evil clone friends show up with a bunch of reinforcements. The boys do a good job against the faceless Umbrella agents, but then the clones have Ada as a hostage, and Barry is too hurt to continue, so he decides to go out in an epic, confusing hail of bullets. He steps out, he gets shot, then he tosses the gun, and then gets shot some more, then catches the gun, then shoots someone, then gets shot some more. Doesn't help to save Ada whatsoever. Alice rescues the girl like how it happens in Aliens, and they end up running into the room where they make all the clones. Imagery kind of reminds me of the factory from Resident Evil Village, but that game came out almost 10 years after this movie, so I don't know. Then the big licker shows up for one last battle with Alice, which ends in an explosion. I should also pay some respect to how decent the giant licker looks after trashing the other ones. Our friends detonate some explosives they planted on their way in, which causes the whole place to collapse. Some fun visuals when the ocean's crashing into the simulations and flooding the place. These wet hunks are able to get the elevator cranking just in time to escape and link back up with Alice before hitting the surface. All these ships here are frozen because remember, the whole world got covered in ice. I mean a desert. I mean it looks normal. I mean frozen. Our surviving team members are calmly rolling to safety. They're about to meet a chopper that's gonna take them home, but are run off the road by a submarine coming up out of the ice from underneath them. Yeah! Evil Jill and evil clone Letty step out, who still have Ada hostage. Letty injects herself with a plaga parasite that I guess makes her immediately invincible. We're well past that's not how that works at this point. These two guys shoot at her a bunch to no avail.
I mean, it's pure John Carpenter.
Meanwhile, Alice is going head to head with Jill. Jill has like a staff that's like extends and has spikes or blades in the end. And Alice has these ice pick things. This is a good snow variant for Alice. The black parka with the black fur and the ice picks. I could totally see this action figure. The fight is a bit of fun. Jill's defeated when Alice removes the mind control spider. It wasn't even that hard. I'm surprised it wasn't the first thing she tried. Maybe she assumed it would have been hard like in the game, so she didn't try it until later. Meanwhile, Letty punches Luther in the heart in Mortal Kombat so hard that it fully kills him. These movies really love killing off the best characters. I'm annoyed that him and Alice never got a chance to fuck. Oh, is that why you killed him off, Paul? So after Luther dies, Letty's also kicking Leon's ass. She's about to finish him off, but she stops when all of a sudden, Dom shows up, racing across the ice in the Charger, heat-seeking missile in tow. He jumps his car over the submarine with characteristically precise timing, allowing the missile to hit the submarine and explode it. Then when the smoke clears, he just goes over and gives Letty a hug, and they start making out, and the camera just pulls back, so I guess all is forgiven, even though she killed Luther. We cut back to the rest of the team decompressing on the helicopter home. Jill seems to be perfectly fine almost immediately. Leon makes a very awkward pass at Ada, and she rejects him, which was fun. So they get to the White House. Alice goes in to have a personal meeting with the president, who turns out to be Wesker, who is now going by the nickname President Evil. Before these two have a chance to catch up, the little devil injects Alice with her powers again. Wesker's apparently leading a massive war against all monsters, and he needs the most powerful being in the universe back to full power and on his side. He takes Alice, along with Ada, Jill, and Leon, up to the roof to show them the situation and tells them they are humanity's last stand. The camera pulls back to reveal the hugeness of this battle, the humans about to be thoroughly overwhelmed by a massive army of zombies and monsters. This is what I'm talking about, Paul. This movie didn't quite reach the incredible highs of the best moments from the last one, but it was still an amazing ride, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity. There's only one movie left, and all I know about it is that it's called The Final Chapter, but at this point my hopes are pretty high. I'm really glad the final movie is gonna see Alice back at full power, and hopefully start with her laying waste to this massive siege of monsters. They set up Ada, Jill, and Leon as all returning. I know these movies don't have a perfect track record with characters returning, so it'll probably just be a few of them, but maybe they'll pull out all the stops for the final movie and bring everyone back. All around, it's just amazing the energy they've been able to maintain in this series for a decade now, and I just can't wait to see how they stick the landing in the final movie. This is the worst one that they made. I really tried telling myself I liked this movie. By the time I got here, there was nothing more I wanted in this world than a satisfying ending to this franchise, and I desperately tried to convince myself that's what I got. But this movie fails at almost everything it should have been. It's a supremely disappointing follow-up to the last movie's cliffhanger, not really enjoyable in its own right, and was a pretty unsatisfactory way of closing the whole thing out. It's also weirdly tame compared to the last couple, which they attempt to compensate for with constant shaky cam and as much cutting as possible. This series deserved to go out in a convoluted blaze of glory like Barry Burton, but this movie is much more of a whimper than a bang. Oh, and before we get into how bad the actual movie is, remember that controversy I mentioned at the beginning of this video? Yeah, so apparently a crew member died while making this movie, and this was after a separate incident where a stunt performer had suffered life-altering injuries on the same set. And look, accidents happen, even in the safest environments, and there have been plenty of injuries on the Resident Evil sets before, and while that's never ideal, it's part of the stunt performer's job to take some licks. So I understand people are gonna get hurt, and stunt doubles understand that too. They know that's a big reason why they're there. But there's never an excuse for not taking every precaution possible. I know I've been praising all the real stunts and action throughout this series, and I stand by that, of course. I want more movies to have real stunts and action. But if you don't have the time or money to make sure a stunt can be done safely, then you need to find another way to do it. If it ends up being a full CGI shot or terrible green screen, well, that sucks, and I will complain and make fun of it when it looks bad, but it's better than risking somebody's life. And also, I want to be clear that this didn't influence my opinion on the film whatsoever. I thought it sucked way before I learned any of this. Let's talk about it. Right when we open, I'm immediately put off by the flood of backstory and new information about some scientist we never heard of who started developing the T-virus while looking for a way to cure his daughter's progeria. The cure kinda works, but it also makes zombies, so the guy wants to shut the program down, and Dr. Isaacs, you remember him, he has this guy killed and then takes over the Umbrella Corporation, adopts the daughter, Alicia, and then adapts her mind and likeness into an AI that becomes the Red Queen. I love that. Rather than building on all the established lore from the last 5 movies, this final entry tries to set up new lore that is mostly independent from everything we already knew, so they can make the movie about that instead. Plus, the last 2 movies had great opening credit sequences. This one just skips that. And the Blu-ray menu sucks too. It's just a static image. We see this more and more with Blu-rays these days, but the older ones had fun menus. So back to modern day, we get to see how that giant epic battle from the last movie played out. It happened off screen and all the other protagonists probably died or something. It's never mentioned at all, whatever. What are you doing, Paul? How could you think this would be okay? Alice wakes up in a mostly empty DC and then has an okay chase scene with one of those flying things. See, we promised the flying thing at the end of the last movie. Here it is. Great, yeah, that was the one thing people wanted from the last movie's ending. I'm very satisfied. Then the scene ends. Amongst the rubble, Alice hears a dot matrix printer going absolutely ham, so she follows the noise underground where she runs into who else but the Red Queen. Alice is pissed at her for destroying destroying the world, but the Red Queen's like, no, I was trying to save the world. Wesker's the bad guy again. He pretended to give you your powers back at the end of the last movie. As a trick. The biggest victim of the attack on DC was Paul W.S. Anderson's filmmaking balls. He was too afraid to attempt to deliver on the premise he set up, so he just took the lame way out and did his best to ignore it. I cannot believe this is the same guy who used to follow up his cliffhangers like this. The Red Queen tells Alice that she's actually been working to save humanity, and she needs Alice to get the magic antivirus that will automatically kill all zombies. And where is it located? But of course, the Hive. That's right, turns out the Hive had an even more secret bunker underneath it, and the Red Queen needs Alice to go get the antivirus and save the world. She isn't able to do it herself because she's incapable of harming any Umbrella employee, so Alice has to do the heavy lifting, and also she has exactly 48 hours. Why's it gotta be like this? I mean, the arbitrary countdown is fine, but why make it exactly 48 hours down to the second? It would feel so much less stupid if it was like 49 hours and 23 minutes. These movies play so fast and loose with the passage of time anyway, the exact amount of minutes she's given doesn't matter at all. And I'd also like to point out, not that the continuity has ever made any sense, but the Red Queen says that what originally happened in the Hive was 10 years ago, but the Raccoon City outbreak that started the worldwide infection, or didn't depending on which of these movies you're watching, seemed to start just a couple days after the Hive incident, as a direct result of the Hive incident. Then the last movie, or at least the opening scene of the last movie, explicitly takes place 4.5 years after the start of the outbreak. So I don't know where that extra 5 years came from. I guess at some point, either when Alice was in that Umbrella hospital at the end of the first movie, or when she was in the underwater facility in the last movie. Both of those seem to only last a couple of days at most, but apparently at least one of those events lasted several years. Additionally, the apocalypse started in like 2003, but in this movie we see lots of cars from the 2010s. And later in this shot of New York, we see the new World Trade Center, which hadn't been built yet. Very, very sloppy. Alice's road trip is soon interrupted, leading to her happening upon this sweet BMW. You know, now that you mention it, there are some definite similarities in the logo. But obviously it's a trap. A bunch of Umbrella soldiers pop out. They're of course back to looking like they're from a low-budget TV show. They looked so badass in the last one. Come on, guys. After a decently cool but overly edited scene where Alice fights these guys while hanging upside down, she is defeated by the motorcycle and wakes up in this stupid tank with a bunch of people and a bunch of Jesus stuff in it, with only 20 hours left. Turns out Dr. Isaacs is here. He's alive and well and in charge of this tank. The one she killed back in the third movie was just a clone. Kinda like Palpatine, but less stupid than Palpatine, but still stupid. He then has all the religious fanatics that live inside this tank condemn Alice to be tied up and keel-hauled behind the tank and get eaten by zombies. And this is where the film's biggest influence finally came into focus for me. It heavily downplays the sci-fi elements and mythic framing of the previous entries in an attempt to capitalize off the success of the Walking Dead TV show, which was already in decline when this movie came out. The visuals are so drab here. Compare this to how rich with color the last movie was: a pink room, a cool blue tundra, a warm morning, interesting uses of grayscale with hints of red, wet neon-soaked streets, crisp blacks over bright whites, dark blacks and vibrant reds over stark whites, black, white, and red over deep blues, red, blue, and black on white. Remember dope-ass shots, Paul? Remember making images in a movie look cool? It's one of the only reasons I'm here. This is strong, bold use of color. This is boring. And the visual aesthetic of a movie communicates a lot to the audience. The last movie's vibrant, glossy color palette, locked-off shots, smooth camera work, and of course slow motion tells me that this is supposed to be fun, fantastical, and ridiculous. This movie's sepia color palette, dark lighting, and gritty, shaky handheld camera work tells me that this is supposed to be serious and realistic. And the more seriously these movies ask me to take them, the harder time I have ignoring their flaws. And again, just not nice looking regardless of what it communicates. Even the one set on a desert planet had more visual character than this. There are a handful of nice interior shots, but they're few and far between. The zombies also look less fantastical and more just like rotting corpses, a la The Walking Dead. They can't use tools or weapons like we've been seeing more and more in the movies, and they generally don't seem to have any abilities other than running at the speed of a human. They also play a pretty small role in the movie, but they've been less and less important for a while now. Have I mentioned how much I hate the editing in this one? Most Most of these movies have been more chopped up than I would have liked, but this one feels personal. Pretty much every scene is just relentless with the cutting. So Alice is back in the nuked out Raccoon City to try to get back into the hive and get the antivirus. I haven't played Requiem yet, but based on what I'm seeing here, I feel 100% confident in saying that the new Resident Evil game is just a full ripoff of this movie. In the city, Alice meets this lame-ass group of survivors. None of them are like the cartoon characters or super soldiers or B-movie action heroes that rounded out the casts of previous movies. Instead, we have this group of lifeless, more realistic apocalypse characters. That's a bad thing, by the way. I want my Resident Evil characters to be cartoons. I vastly prefer one-dimensional characters that look like this over one-dimensional characters that look like this. One of these boring survivors is Ruby Rose, who, if you'll remember, was everywhere back then for like 4 years. And a returning Ally Larder as Clear Redfield. That's it for returning characters in this movie. Well, and technically Wesker's here, but we'll get to that. Claire has some BS line about what happened to her after the Arcadia, still not mentioning Chris or Kmart at all. A big thing in this movie is learning about the true origins of the outbreak. Again. So while Alice and her loser friends are infiltrating the hive, which is made up almost entirely of locations we've never seen before, the Red Queen decides to use a bit of Alice's extremely valuable time to show her an incriminating tape of Dr. Isaacs showing the board of directors his plan to end the world. Okay, so at first the T-virus was just a science experiment that was released in the hive and then got out by accident and eventually spread. But then no, actually we learned that it was a bioweapon that every government on Earth maliciously unleashed upon every other government on Earth. But then no, actually, we're learning now that the apocalypse was started intentionally by the Umbrella Corporation so they could wipe out humans because humans are killing the Earth.
Unchecked population growth, global warming.
But they don't want to wipe them out with bombs because that'll destroy a bunch of stuff. So they land on the idea of using bioweapons instead so they can make sure all the world's infrastructure stays intact for when they emerge from their cocoons and reclaim the surface.
An orchestrated apocalypse, one that will cleanse the Earth of its population but leave its infrastructure and resources intact.
Yeah, how's that part working out for you, you fucking moron? What's this guy a doctor of exactly? He didn't realize that 99% of the world's infrastructure would become completely unusable from neglect alone within like a year or two, which says nothing for the destruction reaped by the giant monsters you unleashed. Not only that, but he also didn't expect that the remaining survivors would likely want to alter the infrastructure to suit their survival needs, overhauling buildings, rerouting electricity, adapting plumbing systems, roads, farmland. And the scene where he's explaining this evil plan is played completely straight. Like, what you're laying out here is so dumb, it would be less embarrassing if you were in like a sci-fi cartoon set and not a normal-ish looking boardroom. But the visuals and camera work that are strongly suggesting that what's being said here has some kind of weight only further highlights what nonsense this is. And so the board isn't fully convinced, but Isaacs ends his presentation by saying, hey, they did it in the Bible and it worked out great. No reason to think it would go any different this time.
I'm just saying, why does God get to do something that I don't?
And all the board members are like, damn, can't argue with that. All right, let's destroy the world. I guess I do like the idea of Umbrella intentionally causing the outbreak because then they're more evil and they already retconned this like 4 times, so what's one more retcon on our way out? All our characters finish watching this tape and now they only have 37 minutes left to release the antivirus. After going through all the brand new areas of the hive and none of the ones we've seen before and losing most of her weak-ass crew along the way, it's time for Alice to confront Dr. Isaacs. There's a bit of a Mexican standoff because Claire's boyfriend turns out to be a bad guy and Wesker has Claire hostage and Isaacs has this implant that lets him win every fight because it gives him computer-like reflexes or something. And he also says that he's the real Dr. Isaacs and the crazy religious one in the tank was also just a clone and there are tons of clones and all the clones are programmed to think that they're the real one. How this doesn't send him into an existential spiral wondering if he's also a clone, I do not know. If you were being generous, you could say that his arrogance blinds him to the possibility that he could be a mere copy. But I'm not inclined to be generous with this one. Finally, Isaacs decides to drop the bombshell. This old lady who we saw briefly in the boardroom earlier rolls on in and it's revealed that she is Alicia, the daughter of the other scientist from the beginning, and the Alice us that we've been following this whole time is indeed a clone of Alicia. And also this entire time, what I gathered at least, is that Alicia has openly been trying to stop Isaacs from doing his evil plan, but he can't kill her for some reason because she's the one true CEO, so he's just been waiting for her to die. I don't care. What's important is that Alice was created in Alicia's image to be the woman she was meant to be or whatever, and get this, as the Red Queen was equally created in Alicia's image to preserve the child she once was or some shit, this means that this entire time, the Red Queen has basically been Alice's sister. And setting aside how this doesn't square whatsoever with the Red Queen's behavior in the last movie and how she basically has an entirely different personality now so she can come off less threatening, which is stupid, I found this to be a fun reveal. And it's also kind of cool because the Red Queen in this one is played by Mila Jovovich and Paul Anderson's daughter. And having the girl look so much like Alice does help sell this stupid idea slightly better. And the older Alicia is of course Mila Jovovich in makeup. These two really are the Judd Apatow and Leslie Mann of cheesy action schlock. During this big reveal, Wesker's just standing back holding a gun on Claire. His minimal presence in this movie is another one of the most frustrating aspects for me. The look is still good, and Sean Roberts is still awesome, and I love all the scenes of him standing in a basement arguing with a little girl hologram, and I also like his smile after he kills a bunch of Alice's friends in a giant fan, but it's such a slap in the face that he's been demoted to lackey. He's not a supervillain whatsoever anymore. He feels more like the head of security. And I'm supremely annoyed how obvious it is that the reason they made Wesker take a backseat to Isaacs was because at the time this movie came out, one of the most important things for a movie to do was to put someone from Game of Thrones in a prominent role. So because of this, Wesker's mustache-twirling anime character days are over, and now he's just the yeah boss guy. When Alicia shows up, she tries, but doesn't really succeed at killing Wesker RoboCop style.
Albert Wesker, you're fired.
But he is thoroughly incapacitated, he can't move at all, so Alice leaves him with a grenade to hold for as long as he can before it explodes. And that's it for the only great villain these movies had, the guy who had his head blown wide open, then 5 minutes later was walking around without a scratch on him, who then immediately went on to survive a nuclear bomb and continue to be able to move at the speed of the Flash, was taken out by a crushed foot. I suppose I should be grateful that Wesker's in this movie at all, considering what happened to every other character. And what, he was lying the entire time when he was helping Alice escape in the last movie? Why? Why help her escape then? Then as he's dying, he says,
I should have killed you in Washington.
Which strongly implies that he left her alive by choice. Why did he do that? Well, goodbye, Wesker. The real villain took the antivirus with him, but everyone down here is still faffing about for a little bit. Before Alice decides to chase after Dr. Isaacs, Alicia and the Red Queen decide to use a little bit more of her time to inform her that when she releases the antivirus, it will kill all the zombies and monsters, but since the T-virus is bonded with Alice's DNA, it will kill her too. But Alice already knew about this, and she still thinks it's the move. While Isaacs is on his way out, the Red Queen is still doing what she can to stop him, and she hits him with one last callback to that iconic line.
You and the Umbrella High Command, you are all going to die down here.
This one works a lot better than the last movies. When Alice catches up to him, they end up in the laser hallway of all places. I do like the visual of it being completely covered in grime that gets lasered off, and it is a fun idea to have the epic final showdown take place in the most iconic location from these movies. But Isaacs of course forgets to start with the grid, allowing Alice to win and make it up top with the antivirus. However, and I've been skipping a lot of this movie, they still really want to draw things out, so before Alice can unleash the antivirus, Isaacs is back again! But then the clone of him from earlier shows up and kills him, and then the clone gets eaten by zombies. I don't care, but now Alice is free to unleash the cure. And you know, as disappointing as this movie was, I was really feeling it during this part. The music swells as a giant horde of zombies runs towards Alice, and I was thinking about what a wild journey it's been, from being a fan of the first movie for so long, to realizing that that film didn't even scratch the surface of the upcoming insanity. And while Alice certainly wasn't the most depthful movie protagonist I've ever met, Mila Jovovich plays her well, and I've been following her for so long that I can't help but care a little bit. So she then breaks the vial, saving the world in a selfless act of sacrifice. As the incoming horde starts falling one by one while the world's cure begins to spread, Alice collapses to the ground, never knowing the life she deserved, but finally at peace. You know, this was obviously the worst movie in the series, but despite all that, I think this was a legitimately beautiful ending. I'm kinda embarrassed to admit it, but I got a little misty-eyed here, and it makes it a lot easier to forgive the... what? What the hell's happening? No, don't do this, Paul. Are you fucking with me? Okay, so never mind what I was saying. It was just a test. Alice is fine. The Red Queen just needed to know if she would be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. And now she's rewarded by getting an upload of Alicia's memories, thus retroactively giving Alice a happy childhood, something that she's apparently always wanted even though it was never mentioned once before. Then she says goodbye to the Red Queen, says nothing to Claire, gets back on her motorcycle and heads to the Big Apple, because, well, it's gonna take a while for the antivirus to work its way around the world, and there's a lot more zombies to kill before then. Well, that was extremely unsatisfying and a little embarrassing. We've finally reached the muling end of a once epic saga. And the tragedy is that there are a few small changes that would not have made this movie good, or fun, or entertaining, but would have made it significantly more satisfying as an ending. Number one, this should be obvious, but let Alice die at the end. I want the self-sacrifice that you told me to care about to actually matter. 2, keep Wesker as the main villain. Ian Glenn is more of a good actor in the traditional sense, but Sean Roberts' hammy performance really embodies the strengths of this franchise. And it's so sad seeing Wesker moved back to second banana. And 3, this one's actually super minor, but would have made a huge difference to me. I feel like it would have been neat to bring the whole franchise full circle visually by having the shot of Alice tossing the antivirus directly mirror the opening scene of the first movie when Spence tosses the original T-virus. Have the shot that ends it all be a thematic reverse, but visual recreation of the shot that began it all. It's like they kinda wanted to do that, but couldn't remember exactly how it looked, and they couldn't check because they didn't have the VHS tape. Yeah, of course what I wanted was what was promised at the end of the last movie, but if you're gonna completely puss out, I could still have walked away relatively satisfied if they had at least done those 3 things. I wouldn't even really mind that I didn't like the rest of the movie as much. You used to have balls, Paul. What happened to your balls, Paul? The self-sacrifice feels so much more heroic, dramatic, and beautifully tragic. And most importantly, more final. A little shallow, sure, but what movie series are we watching?
It's just as emotional as if you had died, if not more so. I think to actually kill you at the end would have kind of been a bit of a slap in the face.
Wrong! Wrong, motherfucker! But as much as that sucked, this franchise succeeded far longer than it had any right to. And this movie was plenty financially successful. It even beat out Transformers 4 and Captain America Civil War in China. It was the highest grossing movie in the series, and to this day is still the 20th highest grossing horror movie of all time. Endings are hard, especially when you're a coward, but I suppose this definitely could have been worse. It didn't end on any unresolved plot lines, and even though it's pretty shameful to leave the door open for more adventures, at least it is some kind of an ending. It still sucks, but it didn't sour me on everything else I loved. At its best, this franchise is some of the most fun you can have watching a movie. It also really helps if you're stupid like me. The action scenes are some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. The only time these movies aren't funny is when they're trying to be funny. But luckily the lame jokes are few and far between. The reputation these movies have for having nothing to do with the games whatsoever is pretty inaccurate. They remind me a lot of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. They don't give me what I crave from Star Trek, but they're fun action movies that have a lot of visuals and references to something that I love. And that's a bit of fun. The Blu-ray for this one had a trailer for Spider-Man Homecoming before it, and it made me realize that the first movie in this series came out before Tobey Maguire's first appearance as Spider-Man, and this last movie came out after Tom Holland's first appearance as Spider-Man. So this movie franchise really did span a multitude of pop culture eras, and I think that's neat. As trash as they were at the time, for the most part these movies are so much more creative and bold than what we see nowadays. Movies today are too cowardly to risk being perceived as cheesy. Instead, we get boring movie that takes itself seriously but then inserts awkward jokes, franchise movies that are deathly afraid of stepping more than an inch past what people already know, continuations of movie series that have been put to rest time and time again, content, nostalgia bait, algorithm, content, algorithm, nostalgia bait, content, say what you will about these movies, but you cannot call them content. I long for an era when these were the bad movies that dummies watched. Big, loud, stupid nonsense is so much better than bland, reheated, insanely expensive, but embarrassingly cheap-looking blockbuster releases. And even compared to similar franchises from the time, I'll say they're a lot less crass and juvenile and offensive and cringe than a Michael Bay Transformers movie or whatever. I think they're in a great lane. And speaking of watching things, there's actually one more movie on our list. It's not a follow-up to the final chapter in any way, shape, or form. I wanted to round things out by talking about 2021's Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. This This movie's okay. Is it worse than the final chapter? Definitely not. Plus, nobody died making it, and it didn't drop the ball on a long-running story that I was mildly invested in, or failed to deliver on a really cool cliffhanger, so plenty working in this movie's favor already. This is a much more direct adaptation of the games, specifically the first two games, specifically the remakes of the first two games. It combines the stories of those games into one story, which is kind of a neat idea, but I think it's way too much for one movie. Normally I advocate for things being shorter, but this would have worked a lot better as an 8-episode TV show. So this is a movie about Leon Skennedy and Claire Redfield escaping Raccoon City during the outbreak, while at the same time, Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, and Albert Wesker go to investigate Bravo Team's missing chopper and find a creepy mansion in the woods. But that's mostly the second half of the movie. The first half is more of an original story. Not an amazing one, it's kind of just a bunch of drawn-out setup for a rushed second half. I was quite shocked to see that Paul and Jeremy were listed as producers here, but there's very little shared DNA with those beloved classics. This is trying to be a horror movie. And I gotta say, it was a little spooky. The opening scene with Lisa Trevor in particular. I'm not gonna get super deep into the plot on this one, since it's just the games, but let's talk about some other specifics. The cast. So race swapping, gender swapping, always a hot button issue. I think there are plenty of instances where it can totally work, and plenty of instances where it's a terrible idea. The thing here is, though, that a lot of Resident Evil characters have a very iconic look, and they usually don't have too much going on outside of their iconic look, so I think it's best to avoid changing their appearance too much. That being said, Leon, I actually liked him a lot. Fans probably won't be happy that he's a traumatized alcoholic, but I thought it was fine for this story, and despite him not having the iconic hair, I think he fits the role really well. Claire, she's fine, doesn't nail the look, and they also strongly imply that she, not Jill, is the master of unlocking.
How'd you get in?
Picture lock.
But I liked her just fine. Chris. Robbie Amell really looks like young Chris, and that's cool, but I definitely preferred Wentworth Miller's quirkier performance. Hey, both of these guys were in The Flash, and one of them was an ice guy, and one of them was a fire guy. But why does he have a lighter in this if he doesn't smoke? Let me see him smoking a cigarette. Smoking is cool and healthy. Also, this version of Chris is romantically attracted to Jill, which is gross. Him and Jill are just very good platonic friends. Jill. Nope, too much deviation from the iconic look, but more importantly, she's characterized as a borderline psychotic loose cannon. I don't know whose idea this was, but you're fired. Wesker. Well, he's not a race swap, but he still looks nothing like Wesker. He's played by someone from the Umbrella Academy. I haven't watched that show, but Umbrella Academy? Umbrella Corporation? Yeah, this is probably the worst casting choice in the whole movie. The guy doesn't do a bad job acting at all, but he's just so wrong for the part. He gives off such lovable, sweetheart, gentle giant energy. He's way less edgy than any of the good guys. I guess they were going for a tragic fall from grace kind of thing. I don't like it. I much prefer Wesker as evil and conniving, or at least gleefully self-serving. This guy, I just want him to give me a hug. Also, he doesn't have the iconic sunglasses, but we do get a post-credit scene with Wesker's sunglass origins. This scene is where we also briefly meet Ada. Not much to say about her in this movie, but I recognized the voice immediately, looked it up, and confirmed that this is the same person who did a terrible job playing Ada in the Resident Evil 4 remake. So now I blame this movie for that casting. Also, we have William Birkin, played by Neil McDonough, good enough, and Chief Irons, played by Donald Logue. I always loved Donald Logue, and he's good in this, and the scene in the car is the best thing in the movie, but he isn't evil like in the games. In the games, he's an evil motherfucker. In this movie, he's not even any kind of antagonist, really, he's just curmudgeonly. Raccoon City in this is portrayed as smaller than we've ever seen it, kind of a city in name only, and I find it a little weird that the police station is the only big building in town. This city used to be the home of the Umbrella Corporation, but they moved out and now the town is dying and the only people that are still there are those who couldn't afford to leave. None of this is shown on screen, they just tell us in a big wall of text about 12 minutes into the movie. I can see why they needed to spell it out for us, because before the zombies show up, it looked like a healthy enough town. There doesn't appear to be much poverty or crime, all the homes and businesses and streets look well kept, the lights are on everywhere. Bad job. Here's a weird one. I think some art department intern got confused when putting this police car together. See, the car is overturned. It's upside down. So the 911 on the side should be upside down. And it looks like the individual ones are upside down, but if this car was turned right side up, it would say 116, not 911. Not sure if this is just what happens when you keep hiring Canadians to make your movies, or if it was done intentionally because people are too stupid to get it if it was the right way around. Either way, I'm not happy, and this is just sloppy, Paul. Aside from that, it's a nice enough looking movie overall. well. There are some great practical effects, there's a lot of CGI blood that didn't look great, the monsters mostly look decent, it's all fine I suppose. Miscellaneous complaints include bummed that we only got about 8 notes into Moonlight Sonata. That song's such a banger and such a cool part of the first game. The foyer of the Spencer Mansion looks a little too small, and it's weird that Birkin's shirt kinda looks like a Disney castle. Miscellaneous positives include this scene where a flaming zombie calmly walks up to Leon at his desk. This movie has a surprisingly solid licensed soundtrack, and the font that they used in the credits,
I mean, it's pure John Carpenter.
and so there you go. Not a bad movie, not a great movie, but I liked it more than at least 1 or 2 of the others. I don't know, here's how I rank them. Wow. Conclusion. So that's all. Not really interested in the animated movies. I'm a little interested in this Lance Reddick TV show. Maybe someday. I'm definitely keen to see where Zach Cregger takes the idea. Not because I want another Resident Evil adaptation, but because he makes good movies. And he seems to be going for a similar approach to Paul W.S. Anderson when he made the first movie, doing a story that's adjacent to the games and feels like the games, but isn't a recreation of any of the games. And I think that's the right move. Hopefully he has a decent amount of control over the project. With this video, I just really wanted to highlight some things that I think have been lost in movies. So many things I used to take for granted or just outright dislike. Yeah, I used to think these movies were worthless junk, but now I gaze upon them with tearful eyes of wonder, realizing all too late what we once had. But hey, if you're craving more of Paul W.S. Anderson's Resident Evil universe, I shit you not, most of these movies got novelizations. And you know what? I just can't think of a better note to end things on, so we're just gonna leave it there. But I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments, especially if you liked these movies. I also started a Patreon, so go ahead and check that out in the link in the description if you want to support the channel and get some epic perks. And check out my second channel too, that's still completely free. If you've been around here for a while, what did you think of me switching it up a little bit in this video? Are you angry? Let me know. Subscribe!